Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku ran away and got adopted by hawks. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Okay, in hindsight, Izuku really should have thought this through. He could have at least checked the weather before he decided to run off. But no, his first thoughts were, grab the notebooks, set of cloths, and run, no further questions asked. No more dealing with. No more dealing with the bullies, no more people calling him Deku. He was sick and tired of it all. Everything from every waking moment was abuse. He sighed. Is it really abuse if she just forgot about you? His brain supplied. Izuku shook his head, everything else was. The burns, the notes, the flowers, everything. He was done. No more. Which is why Izuku brilliantly came up with the idea of running away. It sounded better at the moment, okay? Izuku clenched his hands around the straps of his backpack as rain poured from the night sky. He was quickly reminded of the burn on his shoulder as the strap strained against it. Izuku paused to remove the strap from his shoulder. A quick glance up and Izuku might have seen it, a quick flash of red from the roof. Izuku pulled out the crappy phone from his jean pocket. 45%, that was good. Thunder erupted from the sky and Izuku tensed. He needed to find somewhere to get out of the rain. With a quick glance around, Izuku spotted a hand reaching towards his shoulder. Hey, kid dash. The voice was abruptly cut off by Izuku proceeding to fling his backpack into the figure's face. Izuku began to move his feet any direction away from whoever this was. It was then he really got a good look at the figure. It was a young adult, from what he could tell. The person was clenching their nose. Izuku could only stare as he realized the person had large red wings. Oh, shit. Kigo should have known better than to approach the kid from behind, but it would have probably scared him worse to plummet down from the sky in front of him. Kigo held his nose as the greenette quickly descended into a panic. Oh my god. I am so sorry. He frantically reached for the backpack. Kigo shook his hands. Don't worry, kid, I shouldn't have approached you like that, he grumbled. Ding, you pack a punch, whatcha got in there? Bricks? He added after a minute. The preteen shook his head. Just notebooks, Hawk-san. Kigo shook his head. Drop the san, too formal. Now, wanna tell me why a 10-year-old is out at near midnight? He asked. The kid shifted his feet, as if uncomfortable. Jay just walking. Kigo, while a new pro and severely underexperienced with dealing with liars, could see the kid was lying. The kid had a backpack, an extra layer of clothes, and appeared to be in a hurry to go somewhere. Yeah, and I'm all might. What's with the backpack? Do your parents know you're out here? Greenie stiffened at the mention of parents. Kigo sighed, that was a no. The kid was a runaway. So, why run away? It struck Kigo like a hammer. Kid, are you safe at home? It was a cautious approach, and usually got answers out of the kids. The kid rolled his eyes. Rolled them, as if whatever the hell was going on here was obvious. If you're asking if I'm being abused at home, then no. Kigo felt a twinge of irritation run through him, vague answers, of course. If you're safe at home, then why aren't you there right now? Told you, walking. That was a lie. No, it wasn't. Yes, and you're doing it again, kid dash. Not a kid. You're 10. I'm 12. Still too young to be out on the streets this late at night. Kigo finalized the banter. The kid huffed and looked at the hero. So, you're not actually gonna send me back, are you? Kigo looked at the kid and saw fear, not intense but there. He frowned a little, and made up his mind. Okay. You don't want to go back home, got it. Any relatives I can take you to? Greenie just shook his head. Kigo sagged a little in defeat. Not going home, until further investigation, no relatives, what else? Kigo snuck a glance at the kid who appeared to be holding his shoulder delicately. That's a possible injury. Kigo frowned. Kids your age usually have a lot of friends, right? Got any of those you could stay with? That sparked an immediate reaction out of the kid. No. I don't have any friends. It came off rather defensive. Kigo would question it later. Your shoulder hurts, Kigo stated. The kid turned his torso away from Kigo slightly. He grimaced, paused a second, continued walking, and inhaled deeply. Kid, you don't have anywhere to go, so I can only offer you a trip to the police station or my apartment. The kid stared up at the hero. A confused and calculating gaze was targeted at Kigo. Sorry, Hawks, but aren't you a little young to have an apartment? Hawks opened his mouth to close it again. I am a legal adult, thank you very much, he snorted. The kid smiled slightly. Would have never guessed. Kigo snorted, so the kid did have a backbone. So, apartment it is? Kigo asked, earning a nod from the kid. After walking through the rain for a while, the two were thoroughly drenched. They arrived at a large and rather expensive-looking apartment building. Kigo looked to the kid and motioned for him to follow him in. Izuku would have thought that Hawks could afford a nice apartment with his quickly rising popularity. However, the apartment shown was above what he originally expected. Maybe it was because he stayed in a blank room for his entire life, or maybe it was the entire wall made of windows. Izuku wasn't very sure. You can set your stuff down on the rack right there. Hawks broke Izuku's train of thought, pointing to the rack to the left of the door. Izuku nodded and proceeded to remove the soaked jacket from off of him. Izuku looked inside the backpack to see that the notebooks had not gotten wet, thanks to the plastic bag they were wrapped in. A smile made his way across his face as he pulled out notebook. Izuku set it, along with the other 14, down on the table and grabbed his spare clothes. Hey, where's your bathroom? Hawks peeked his head into the room. Second door on the hall to the left. Izuku nodded. He threw his wet clothes into the plastic bag he'd kept his notebooks in. Returning to the living room, he found Hawks in the kitchen, which was placed conveniently behind the living room and just to the side of the glass wall. Izuku watched as Hawks looked thoroughly through the fridge. Hey kid, what do you want to eat? Izuku shrugged. Anything you give me is fine. Hawks, however, seemed annoyed at that answer. Oh God, am I gonna get kicked out? Did I really just screw up my one shot at a warm place to stay tonight? Sheet, he's gonna send me to the station, and I'm going to have to go back home. Back to school, back to no. Izuku was broken from his thoughts by a steaming cup of soba in front of him. Hawks gave Izuku a friendly smile, which immediately lessened the stress of the situation. Alright, I can't keep calling you kid, so can I get a name? Izuku looked at the hero. His first name would have to do for now. Izuku. Hawks smiled at that. I'm Kigo. Izuku nodded and began to eat his soba. Kigo eventually accompanied him with his own cup of soba. So, I noticed you have a lot of notebooks, is that your homework or something? Kigo asked suddenly. Izuku finished his bite of soba. Those are actually just a hobby of mine, he smiled. Kigo nodded. What you got in them? Izuku's eyes light up. I have quirk notes. They're all the different Q quirks I see and I analyze them. Kigo seemed slightly taken aback by the boy's sudden spark of enthusiasm. How good are they? Izuku shrugged. No one other than me has ever really seen them, so I don't exactly have an outside opinion. He smiled weakly. Kigo nodded slowly, contemplatively. Would you mind if I read through some of them? Izuku froze for a second, before hesitantly getting up, sober forgotten. He grabbed notebook 13, and brought it over. One is a bit older but it has an A analysis on you in it. Kigo was surprised. Normally kids would be fanning over All Might or Endeavor, not him. Not when he was so much lower in the rankings than the other two. Sure, he was rising quickly, but he was still at number people usually tended to focus on the top 5 pros. So yes, he was surprised to know the kid seemed so eager to show him his analysis on him. Once Izuku handed Kigo the notebook, he carefully opened it, noticing how the first one was a lesser-known hero, Eraserhead. That's funny. A lot of people don't even know Eraserhead exists. Hell, Kigo only knew after meeting Eraserhead at a hero gala. The pro looked more or less like a hobo and clearly was not one to have fans. Reading on, he found Izuku had expertly detailed lists on his strengths, weaknesses, improvements, past battles, and drag busts, everything. Kigo felt concern well up in his gut. Izuku, where the hell did you get information like this? Izuku's head snapped to Kigo. I came up with most of it myself, but I got the records from the police database, he stated simply. Kigo frowned. Simply, the kid had stated it as if it were elementary school math. You hacked into the police database. Izuku frowned. No? I don't think it was exactly hacking. What would you call it then? Kigo huffed. Guessing the police chief's login. Izuku replied. Izuku, what the actual hell? Kigo sighed, wondering what he got himself into. Kigo had finished reading through notebook. He, in short, was not impressed. He was downright terrified. Where the actual living hell did the kid get all this information from? It was scary amounts of information. Izuku had small writing but neat writing, filling up the 140-page notebook to the brim with notes on heroes. When Kigo had come across his own page, he was met face to face with a full, professional-level analysis. It went into talking about his quirk, dubbed Fierce Wings when it manifested, to how he was working with the Hero Commission. Kigo wanted to burn the notebook, hide Izuku, and fly off the face of the earth. Okay. This has got to be the kid's quirk, right? There is no way. The kid had to have an analysis quirk. Right? Kigo turned to Izuku, who was currently scribbling away at notebook 15 with an inaudible mutter. Hey Izuku, do you have an intelligence quirk? Like Nedzu? Izuku looked up, muttering, ceasing immediately. Q quirk? He asked, voice small and weak. Kigo grew concerned. He knew very well that sometimes quirks were a whole rabbit hole of trauma. He knew they could be the reason for so many things. That's how it was, that's how the world worked. Quirks drove society. If you had anything deemed a weak quirk, you were tossed aside. Powerful, flashy quirks were given the spotlight. Kigo knew all this far too well. So when Izuku tensed up and got a faraway look in his eyes, he worried about the answer. Izuku could only look forward. After a good minute, he slowly let his eyes drift back to Kigo. Promise you won't hate me. Kigo's heart twisted at the question. Who did this to you? It was a question that held so much anger and emotion. Kigo felt himself soften and looked at Izuku. Izuku was distraught. Kigo wanted to know his quirk. Of course, it always came back to goddamned quirks. When he asked the question, he saw the hero's face twist. Is he just getting ready to beat me up? Throw me out? Again, he was proven wrong. He watched as the hero's features softened into a smile. Izuku, I don't know where you came from, hell, I don't even know your last name. That does not change the fact that you are my friend. I won't hate you, no matter what your quirk is. Izuku broke. Years of everyone caring what his quirk was. Years of abuse because of something out of his control. Here stood a hero who did not care. He called me his friend. What a nice thought, friends. He felt hot tears roll down his face. Why is this so hard? Izuku sharply inhaled and mentally prepared himself. At last he spoke, I'm quirkless. Kigo thought he misheard. He wanted to call out a joke, but the look on Izuku's face said it all. Holy shit. There were so many emotions packed behind it. Kigo stood up, walked over to Izuku, and hugged him. You are way too smart. I honestly thought you had an intelligence quirk. Izuku let out a watery laugh. My notebook's that good, here? Kigo was grinning now. I would fire my current quirk analyst right now and hire you kinda good. Izuku blinked. He knew they weren't exactly normal, there was a reason he never failed an assignment, but he wasn't. Professional level. You're joking? Right? Kigo merely laughed. No, I am not. You would do so much better than the current guy doing my quirk analysis. Izuku felt his face flush in embarrassment. I don't think firing your current, professional, quirk analyzer is a good idea. Kigo rolled his eyes. Please, he can only do half the stuff you can. Plus, you may not be able to get a legal job under me without a guardian signature, but you can freelance for me. Izuku's eyes widen. Freelance? Kigo nods. It's where you technically work for yourself. You get commissions from people, which is asking for you to do something for them, and you get a pay. Since you're not a legal adult, I don't think you have to worry about paying taxes on that. So technically you could. Izuku didn't know what to say. It was a job offer, doing what he loved, working under the current number 9 hero. Yes. Kigo stumbled back as Izuku latched himself to Kigo's side. Midoriya. It came out of nowhere. Kigo looked down to the 12-year-old. What? Izuku frowned slightly. My full name is Izuku Midoriya. Kigo smiled and looked at him. I wonder what it would take to get an investigation on his parents. Well, that was a thought for later. Kigo decided he would rather set up Izuku as his freelancer instead. It had been a week. A week has passed since Izuku began staying in Kigo's apartment. A week since Kigo asked him to do analysis for him. A whole week, and not a single missing persons report was filed under Midoriya Izuku. Izuku should say that he was surprised, but he wasn't. Inko hadn't really cared for him since he was 4. Sure, there was the occasional glance to make sure he wasn't doing anything illegal, but other than that Inko never really cared. It was surprising. In a week, Kigo has shown Izuku more kindness to him than people showing him basic human decency. It's absurd. Izuku didn't know why people were like that, but they were. Izuku knew they all thought that he was weak. Nothing more than a glass object, not even human, now that was an insult that had stuck. Izuku was hyper-aware of how people were so subject to the hero system, and he wanted to prove them all wrong. Hey, Kigo! Izuku! Watch it as Kigo set down his paperwork. I'm going to be a hero. A statement, sweet and short. Kigo's eyes locked with Izuku's. Izuku wanted to think that Kigo would tell him to grow up, but Kigo had faith in him. Now it was time for Izuku to have faith in himself. A maniac grin grew across Kigo's face. Izuku suddenly felt dread flood through his system. Well, it sure as hell won't be easy, he began. Right now you're nowhere near where you should be to even be prepared, even if you have the written portion in the bag. That leaves us to work on your fighting. Build some muscle mass on you, agility training would do you good. Martial arts is a must. There was a long pause as Kigo thought, then you could develop high ground attacks. Izuku was there until Kigo said high ground attacks. What? Kigo's eyes sparked with glee. I typically attack my opponents from above. It could be something that you incorporate into your fighting. Not a lot of people are able to defend against a high ground attack. Why do you think I have such a high successful arrest rate? Izuku thought about it. Kigo was right, most people aren't anticipating an attack from above. With the way the heroes are fighting now, it'd be more expected the villain gets in a half-hour-long monologue while the hero causes structural damage to the building. Basic knowledge, the nastier the fight looked, the more the hero did, the more pay they were given. It was kinda sad now that Izuku really thought about it, but that didn't matter now. Izuku looked at Kigo. Yeah, I think that would work. Kigo was shaking with excitement. Izuku wanted to be a hero, great. He did, however, agree to learning high ground attacks. That got Kigo excited. In the week Izuku had been here, the two practically acted like brothers. That's what it felt like, at least. As the hero Hawks, Kigo was known for using his wings as a primary fighting tactic. What most news outlets always failed to grasp was how it was incredibly useful to attack from above. When he attacks from above, he sends the perpetrator into a panicked state. Using his wing blades had always been more secondary than first when coming to catching criminals. Kigo knew Izuku was beyond smart, that much was known. However, he needed to test flexibility. Izuku didn't have wings, he couldn't fly. So Kigo would improvise. Tall walls would work, things to jump off of, anything Izuku could fall off of. That also led into another part of training Izuku, muscle mass. The kid was skin and bones, no doubt about that. Building a little muscle would hurt, but Kigo was more of a ranged fighter than anything. He sighed. Izuku could potentially fight from long range, but he'd be more effective up close. Izuku would be a strategy fighter, no doubt there. As Kigo was brainstorming how to train Izuku, a thought hammered into his skull. Sheet, I totally forgot Izuku has parents. Kigo would not admit that he completely forgot. Izuku had a legal guardian somewhere that maybe or maybe not was looking for him. Kigo sighed and rubbed his face with his hands. Well, looks like I'll be phoning my favorite detective. Kigo grabbed his phone and hit the dial. The phone rang, and hello, this is Detective Tsukochi speaking. Kigo paused a minute before speaking. So, what would happen if I hypothetically had a child that may or may not be subject to serious parental neglect and peer abuse in my house who hasn't been reported for the past week? There was a P&T pause over the line before. Hawks, please tell me you do not have a child with you that would be considered kidnapping. Kigo frowned. He kidnapped no one. Well, excuse you, I haven't kidnapped anyone. As I said, the kid is likely subject to parental neglect and peer abuse, and I wanted to open a case. A very loud groan was heard. I am in the middle of a meeting with Nedzu, could you please save this for some other time? Yeah, I'll call you in an hour, I really don't want to delay this more than it already has been. And with that the phone line went dead. Tsukochi Naomasa loved his job. He really did, but it's times like this, when he really wanted to get a raise. Naomasa set his phone down on the table and looked across it to a rather curious Nedzu. I understand we were discussing how Toshinori's employment would affect his hero time, but what is this about Hawks having a child under his care? Naomasa sighed, took a sip of his coffee and sat down. Hawks just called me asking me to open up a possible case for severe parental neglect and peer abuse towards a child he is apparently housing. Naomasa knew the hero was relatively new to the scene, but there had been cases like this before and Hawks had brought them to the station. That begged the question, what made Mystery Kid so different to where Hawks was housing him? Chapter text. Izuku and Kigo were heading to the police station. In all honesty, it was a rather nice day, not taking into account the fact that Izuku was going to have to contact his mother. I'll be lucky if I don't have to speak to her. The way over was quiet, neither spoke a word. Upon arriving at the station, it was quite underwhelming. Izuku wasn't sure what he expected, but the station looked normal. The interior was interesting too, it reminded Izuku of a hospital. Izuku followed Kigo down the corridor to an interrogation room. Am I being interrogated? Was all he could think to ask. Yeah, not ideal, but you will be questioned by Tsukochi, so it should be fine. Anything you want to know beforehand? Kigo questioned. Izuku thought for a minute, then it came to him. Tsukochi is the human lie detector, right? Kigo chuckled and nodded. I'm right out here if you need anything. I will also be listening in. He grabbed a pair of headphones from off the desk. Izuku sat down in the interrogation chair across from Detective Tsukochi. The detective held a serious look on his face. Izuku's eyes widened. Oh God, I'm interrupting their schedule and wasting their time. It's fine. Maybe I can back out now. The police department can send me back home. I may never see Kigo again, but it's fine. Good morning, my name is Tsukochi, you know why you are here, yes? Izuku's thoughts ceased immediately. Why am I here? Oh yeah. Yes, sir. Tsukochi nodded. Alright then, in case you don't know how this works, I ask you a few questions, you answer truthfully. Izuku watched as the detective looked at his notepad. Alright. First question. We did get a hold of a Midoriya Inko, but she denied all claims of you being gone in the first place. In her words it was no, Deku is just up in his room. Would you care to explain? Izuku inhaled. It's not like he didn't know that Inko called him Deku, but it hurt to know she'd said it to officials rather than just using his name. Kinda like she forgot it. Izuku ignored the thought. Wouldn't be the first thing she forgot. Tsukochi cleared his throat, signaling for a response. I wouldn't be surprised if she believed I was up in my room, she never cares to make sure I'm alive anyway. The last bit came at barely a whisper, but Tsukochi caught it. He abruptly stopped writing. Care to explain? Naomasa shouldn't be surprised right now. He wanted to believe this wasn't true, a mother who just didn't care for the existence of her son? The kid failed to answer any question untrue, and that worried the detective even more so. He put his pencil back to the notepad as Midoriya explained. When I was 4, I got diagnosed as quirkless. Truth, diagnosed, like an illness or disease. I guess it started not too long after that. Started off with her leaving for work and leaving me with breakfast and a note. Eventually the notes stopped, so did most anything. I may allowed leftovers from dinner, but we don't eat any meals together anymore. She tends to see check-in now and then to make sure I'm not dead. It think. Truth. Naomasa was gripping the pencil tightly. He really despised cases like this. They were so rare, but it was always coming down to something that wasn't the child's fault. In this case, it was his quirk or lack thereof. He looked at the kid, who sat there staring off into the distance. Well then, how are things at school? Naomasa thought it was a relatively easy question. Schools could be a safe place for people who weren't exactly safe at home. That wasn't the case. The kid's eyes were no longer finding space, but zeroed in on him, alert. He watched as the kid tensed up. Fine, school has been fine. Lie. Well, Midoriya, I am sure you are unaware of my quirk, lie detector. That got the kid, not that the kid was very good at lying anyway. A frown made its way onto Naomisa's face. Could be better, came a response. Truth. Better how? Midoriya frowned, just better. Better than it is. Right now. Naomasa sighed. He wasn't going anywhere with this, and the kid was being stubborn. Alright, Hawks tells me you arrived at his apartment with a bruise on your right shoulder, is that correct? Midoriya did not forget the detective had a truth queek. He slumped a little in defeat. Just a shoulder wound, nothing serious. Lie. Naomasa looked up at Midoriya, nothing serious. Midoriya's eyes widened a little, I just got burned. It wasn't that bad, and I took care of it myself, he exclaimed, flailing his arms about. Naomasa was not okay with the fact that the kid had gotten burned on his shoulder. How could that even happen? I would like to have someone look over the burn to make sure it at least healed correctly, he stated, looking over to the viewing window. Hawks just sat there with a wide-eyed expression. Kid probably hasn't told anyone about his injuries. That begs the question, how many more does he have? Midoriya sunk into his chair. It's really okay, I've been treating burns my entire life. Truth. Naomasa would be lying if he said he didn't flinch. His entire life? Where was he getting burns from? That. Midoriya, where have you been getting these burns from? Izuku realized his mistake only after the detective asked the question. He quickly thought of a way out of this. It was fine, really, it was no different than any other time he got burned. Why did these people care? Sir, I really am fine. I don't need any tea treatment. The detective simply looked at him. With a disapproving sigh he scratched something down on the notepad. That does not answer the question. Where have they been coming from? Izuku screwed up. Oh god, if I tell them it will ruin Kakubakugu's chances at becoming a hero. I couldn't do that, even if what he did wasn't okay. He'll get better, he'll be a good hero. Eventually. Izuku felt his hands sweat as he tightened his grip on the chair. They came from school, not a lie. Izuku took note of how the detective looked like he wanted to flip the table at that very moment. You've been getting burns from school? Among other things. Izuku's brain offered. Among what other things? The detective asked. Izuku flinched. Shit, I said that out loud. Nothing, sir. Midoriya, we can't do anything unless you tell us what is happening. Izuku wanted to leave. He wanted to curl up under a rock and never come back. Why now? Izuku really hadn't meant for that to slip out, it just did. Tsukochi's eyebrows furrowed. What do you mean, why now? Why now does everything matter? Why now is there anybody offering to do something about it? He shouted, tears threatening to spill. God, he really wanted to leave, this was not on the agenda for today. Why now? Why not the 8 years of shit he put up with? Izuku felt hot tears fall down his face. Tsukochi looked sadly at Izuku. Midoriya, we didn't know this was happening, if we did it wouldn't have ever happened again. Izuku. Suppose that was true. While the detective and Kigo couldn't have ever known what was happening, everyone else did. What makes them so different? He rubbed his eyes with the sleeve of his sweater. I'm sorry for the outburst, sir. The detective sighed. It's all right, Midoriya, But we can't do anything unless you tell us what has been happening. Izuku nodded. They care. They aren't like Inko. They aren't like Bakugu. They aren't like everyone else. It was strange, seeing people actually show concern for him. So he explained everything after the day at the doctor. Kigo was about ready to murder a bunch of kids. Against the law, my butt. He was furious. He listened as Izuku explained the abuse he went through. Villains become villains for reasons smaller than this. What a terrifying thought. Kigo frowned, wondering what would have happened if he didn't run into Izuku. Would he have become a villain? I'd understand why, honestly. He clenched his jaw tight. Burns. Izuku had burns on him and Kigo didn't know. He really should have known. The kid showed up and tended to flinch when he got too close to his shoulder, if he got close at all. Not to mention the fear of loud noises. During Izuku's first night there, Kiego had watched as the kid flinched at every sound of thunder. Izuku stopped talking and stared at the table. He stood up from his chair to enter the interrogation room. I want an investigation on Aldera, staff, students, and I want him removed from Midoriya Inko's custody. Tsukochi nodded as he finished writing in his notepad. We have enough here to open up an investigation on both. Kigo glanced over to Izuku. All right, kid, let's get you some ice cream and go home. Izuku stood up. We're done, he meekly asked. Kigo's heart squeezed. Yeah, you're not going back to that shithole. Izuku's lips twitched upward a little. Kigo grinned and led him out of the station. Upon arriving back at the apartment, Izuku noticed Kigo's expression darkening. I can't believe anyone would let that happen to a child, he grumbled. Izuku looked up at him. It truly was strange how suddenly Izuku's life took a turn. It was nice though, he didn't have to worry about going back to school. Kigo was having him test out of middle school. Sure, he was smart, but Izuku wondered if Kigo's expectations were a little out of reality. He fell onto the couch and looked at the paperwork displayed across the coffee table. It was all of the analysis jobs he'd done. Sure, it had only been a week, but a recommendation from the number 9 hero tended to draw popularity. We're having you test out of school. Izuku met Kigo's eyes. Isn't it a bit soon, thought? I don't even go to high school for the next 3 years. You haven't even gotten custody from my mother. What would I do with that time? What do we do about my mom? He asked. Kigo smiled. Well, since you're wondering, you could learn through college. Courses. While high school may have an age requirement, online college doesn't. Izuku supposed that was true. Aren't you really overestimating my abilities? I mean, I get you think I'm smart, but that's a bit over the top, he replied. Kigo rolled his eyes. In case you didn't know, all of your analysts have been spot on and are never wrong. You have expressed how much farther along your smarts are on multiple occasions. Izuku, you've broken into the police database without anyone knowing. I doubt that school will ever be an issue for you. Izuku frowned at the mention of breaking into the police database. I told you guessing the login is not the same as breaking in. What I did was legal. Kigo laughed. See what I mean? The other day, remember when I gave you that packet? Izuku did remember. A lot of it looked a bit harder than what he would have normally done in school, but he didn't see what was so special about it. It was a placement test. My agency uses them to scout out special talent in students and people in general. I received your results, you DMN near aced it. Kigo proudly stated. Izuku frowned. Surely he didn't do that well. Kigo handed him back the packet that had a clear 98% written in bold across the top. Izuku's breath caught. That's one of the highest scores, Izuku. You tell me again how dumb you are. Izuku nodded, grinning at his score. Seriously, thought, what do we do about getting me out of custody from my mother? He asked, dropping the mood a little. Kigo sat on the couch next to Izuku. We don't technically have any evidence against her neglect. You should be going to school, but you're not, so I assume it's a matter of time before she gets a call. Kigo's phone rang. Kigo picked up the phone and hit answer. Hello. Hey Hawks, this is Tsukochi. We just received a call requesting to open a missing persons case under 1 Midoriya Izuku. Speak of the devil, Kigo frowned. All right, did she finally notice her son has been gone for a week? No, we didn't even get a call from her. Kigo was confused. Who else would be looking for Izuku? Alright, who is looking for him then? There was a pause on the phone, then, someone under the name Mitsuki Bakugu. Izuku was concerned. Kigo had just hung up the phone with someone and looked worried. Hey, Izuku, do you know anyone by the name Bakugu Mitsuki? He asked. Izuku froze. Yes, he did know a Bakugu Mitsuki. Did that mean he wanted to talk to her? Hell no. He did not want to bring Aunt Mitsuki into all of this. She didn't know, she didn't need that stress. Inko and Mitsuki had been friends since their own childhood, so for all Aunt Mitsuki knew, Izuku was fine at home, fine at school, and was still friends with her son. Spoiler alert, he was not. Izuku felt Kigo sit down next to him and place a hand on his shoulder. Izuku flinched at the sudden contact. Kigo noticed. Hey, Izuku, you good? Izuku nodded and shifted his feet. Well, I know. A Bakugu and Mitsuki, he mumbled. Kigo looked concerned. Do you want to talk to her? If not, you don't have to go anywhere near her. Izuku shook his head. No, I should probably talk to her, but she has to come alone. She can't bring anyone with her. Kigo frowned a bit at this request. Any reason why? He pried gently. Izuku looked away. I'll tell you later. Kigo was not satisfied with that answer, but he didn't argue. So, what's your relationship with Bakugu Mitsuki? She's been the only person ever really supportive of me when I was diagnosed as quirkless, her husband too. I'm supposed to get along with her son, but I haven't been friends with him since I was 4. So, Izuku shrugged. Kigo had a feeling there was something much more to it than just not being friends with him. It's worse than just not being friends, isn't it? He stated. Izuku flinched, old memories replaying through his mind. Useless, quirkless, loser. Punch. Burn. Claw. Run. Broken nose, broken finger. Scars on his back and arms. Burns, so many burns. Kigo watched as tears welled in Izuku's eyes. He pulled the 12-year-old into a comforting hug. Hey kid. It's okay, he reminded him, rubbing circles into his back. Kigo felt his shirt dampen as tears fell. Why, you're right. It wasn't just us and not BB being friends. Izuku cried suddenly. Izuku's body shook as he cried. Kigo, however, was planning murder. Izuku, what did he do to you? Izuku did not reply. It scared Kigo. Sure, he had only known Izuku for a week, but no one cried like this. No one sounded so broken, so done. If no one found the body of Bakugu Katsuki, well, that's Kigo's business. Izuku, please, you gotta tell me, Kigo pleased. Izuku was able to take a few deep breaths. Kigo released him from the hug and Izuku leaned into the armrest of the couch. He bullied me. In short. Izuku whispered. Kigo nodded, sure he expected that, but Izuku kept talking. It started when he got his quirk. His quirk is explosions . His quirk is explosions. Kigo said in a dangerously low volume. Yes, Izuku confirmed. Explosions? The kid used his quirk on Izuku. What the f-? Kigo welcomed the scowl on his face. Izuku, can I see that burn on your shoulder? Izuku flinched backwards, his hand flying to his left shoulder. Kigo tensed. He should have gone about that differently. Sorry. It's just, you said he had an explosion quirk, right? You also said you had a burn on your left shoulder. A burn you said was a bruise when we first met. I can't just not make assumptions, Izuku. How the hell do you even get a burn on your shoulder? Kigo, I can't just go telling people he bullied me for years. Not when he's aiming to be a hero. Izuku responded. Kigo was rightfully cessed. He looked directly at Izuku, eyes narrowing. Izuku, it appears you cannot grasp the fact that someone who uses their quirk to abuse someone is no hero. Izuku looked down. It doesn't matter, Kigo. He has a good quirk, perfect even, for being a hero. Everyone has told him from day one that he will be an amazing hero. He's smart and is at the top of the class for everything. It would be cruel to deny him what he'd be perfect for. Izuku, there is this new vigilante, got it? They have a fire quirk that produces a blue flame, but you don't see them going around and burning everybody he deems less than. Kigo snapped back a little harsher than he intended. Izuku could only nod as Kigo went on. I have fought villains Izuku, whose quirk could have been perfect for heroics, but instead they became villains. Kigo paused. Not only that, but there are pro-heroes who have the most useless quirks you could possibly imagine, but they still get the job done. Hell, Eraserhead just erases quirks, but he has one of the lowest civilian injury and damage rates in heroics history. It does not matter what quirk or lack thereof you have to be a hero. What matters is you do your job and protect people. I can sympathize with why villains go down the route they do, Izuku. You know why? It's because they grow up exactly like how you did. They grow up with people like Bakugo in the limelight. Do not tell me he deserves to be a hero when he did that to you. Izuku took in the rather long-winded and intelligent speech. Demon Kigo, did why you even know what half those words meant? He laughed tiredly. Kigo lightly shoved Izuku. Shut up, brat. Now, I am ordering chicken wings, do you have any preferences? Izuku's mouth hung wide open. You eat sea chicken? Isn't that sea cannibalism? He laughed. Kigo rolled his eyes. I'm a hawk, for your information, and you will eat whatever I order for that comment, he smirked, dialing a number. Izuku had freaked out when Kigo asked him to show him the burn. He'll see all the scars. So he was relieved when Kigo seemed to drop the subject. You should probably tell him. He also decided to work on some new analysis cases he had. It wasn't even an hour later when Kigo's order of food had arrived. Izuku took note of the spicy chicken wings that poked out of the bag. Kigo, you dinner's here, Izuku, came a loud shout from Kigo. Izuku was indeed handed a small box of spicy chicken wings. He sighed and sat down, resuming his work. Kigo decided to sit opposite him. So, we have a meeting scheduled with one, and only one, Mitsuki Bakugo on Friday, he offhandedly mentioned. Izuku grunted in confirmation. That gave him 2 days to hopefully never leave the house, never see Bakugo, and also mentally prepare himself to speak with Aunt Mitsuki. It was a short time span, but Izuku believed in himself. He opened his laptop and proceeded to find the search engine. How do I explain to someone that their son has been my long-term bully? He typed in. The search gave him several results. Everything from stopbullying.gov to teenagecrush.com, which, no, he did not have a crush on Bakugo Katsuki. He was not into explosive blondes whatsoever. Eventually he decided the internet is full of lies and deceit, so he settled on performing a self-made analysis on how to approach the situation. Step 1. Aunt Mitsuki is easily set off. Greet her and pretend nothing is wrong. All is clearly right with the world. Step 2. Offhandedly mention how you haven't exactly been living with Inko. Aunt Mitsuki always asks how she's doing. Step 3. Proceed to explain. Step 4. Make a few comments about what absolute hell school is. Step 5. Explain. Izuku looked in satisfaction at his very foolproof plan that couldn't possibly fail. Izuku looked at the clock, 12 a.m. Dear, did it really take that long to write 5 steps? Well, there also was the time I spent looking on the internet. Izuku sighed. It's not that he had insomnia, he just didn't want to sleep. Sleep was great, don't get him wrong, but there was so much he could do with shortening his sleep to 3 hours. Izuku decided he should probably finish those papers he abandoned. Nedzu was thrilled, to say the least. Recently there has been an uprise of a new analyst in the hero community. Apparently, he works specially under Hawks but does freelance work. Nedzu was very intrigued. He had gone through and read some of the papers and reports the mystery analyst had done, and Nedzu, even if he denied it, was impressed. There were highly detailed descriptions of quirks, quirk theory, even some basic crime scene investigations. It was no wonder Hawks fired the old guy for his new one. Nedzu then recalled a meeting with Tsukochi. They had been speaking about Toshinori's hero time and how that would affect his teaching at UA. The sudden call was not anticipated, but Nedzu could wait. Tsukochi looked incredibly exasperated when the caller explained something. Tsukochi had replied with Hawks, please tell me you do not have a child with you, that would be considered kidnapping. Nezu took note that the young hero decided to call Tsukochi, and also took note of said child being kidnapped. An idea struck Nezu: could this new analyst be the child Hawks took in? That would indeed be something, a young child providing such high-level analytical abilities. Nezu was not often intrigued with humans, let alone impressed. He was, however, very interested in meeting the analyst who had gained quite the reputation in under a week. Perhaps I should set up a meeting with Hawks. Thursday came and went much quicker than Izuku would have liked. Most of it was full of writing and theorizing, but the remaining bits were spent freaking out about Friday. Oh God, she's probably told my mom. Not that Inko would care, but I really don't want the possibility of dealing with her. Izuku had to take numerous breaks that day to sit and stare at the wall contemplating what the hell he was supposed to say tomorrow. Of course he knew Uncle Masu and Aunt Mitsuki would be kind towards him, they always were, but he really couldn't help that feeling of dread. What will she think if she finds out about Bakugu's bullying? Will she just be angry at me? Will she react like how Kigo and the detective reacted? Izuku removed his jacket and shirt to wash them. He hadn't exactly had the chance to grab any clothes in the week he'd been with Kigo. In short, his week had been stressful. Sure, it was going on 2 weeks at this point, but every day was a new adventure. Even when Izuku didn't go anywhere. While he really did enjoy the agency work, he wanted to know how secretaries did all of this. He could not imagine just sorting papers and checking numbers all day every day. Sure, it was an okay job, but he'd prefer to actually create the things secretaries had to sort, no offense. Now today, Friday, Izuku had his fateful meeting with Aunt Mitsuki. They were leaving at 12 p.m., which gave him a few hours to get ready. Izuku stumbled into the kitchen and proceeded to open the fridge when an incredibly sharp and very concerned yelp sounded from behind him. Izuku spun around to come face to face with Kigo. Sheet, he's not working at the agency today. He probably saw all the scars. Izuku immediately panicked, making a beeline right to the room he was residing in. The guest room door slammed shut and the lock clicked seconds later. Kigo had not expected to find Izuku without a shirt in the kitchen. He also did not expect to find the kid's entire back to be covered in more scars than some pro heroes. He did not mean to let out such a loud yelp. He did not mean to scare Izuku and have the kid run back into the guest room. So far, Kigo's day had plummeted, and he had a bad feeling it would get worse. Kigo forced himself to walk over to the guest room. He had no idea what to even say to the kid. Hey, I'm sorry, I saw all of your scars that probably hold horrible traumatic memories. He knocked on the door. Hey, Izuku, I'm really sorry for just now. If you want to talk about it, I'm here all day today. There was a muffled grunt from the other side of the door. Kigo sighed and returned to the kitchen. He would wait for Izuku to talk to him. Touchy subject and all that. He eventually resided on the couch and thought about how the meeting would go. Kigo was able to get Mrs. Bakugu to take the day off work to speak with her during school hours. Specifically during this time so that way her son would be at school during the timing of the meeting. There were also specific instructions to not involve her son whatsoever. Not to even speak of the meeting to him, which did cause a slight panic from Mrs. Bakugu. They had to reassure her everything was fine, it wasn't, and that there was no need to worry, there was. Kigo sat on the couch looking through some of Izuku's most recent cases he'd gotten assigned. It was much simpler than what he'd been doing beforehand. Just some simple questions from other heroes and agencies, the occasional in-depth analysis here and there. He then heard soft footsteps come from the hallway. He shifted his position so he could tilt his head back. In doing so, he saw Izuku with a blanket draped over his shoulders heading to the living room. Izuku eventually sat down on the armchair, practically sinking into it. Kigo watched carefully as the preteen relaxed a little. So, you probably want to know about the scars, right? To which he nodded. Kigo sat patiently as Izuku seemed to gather any courage he could find. We talked about Bakugu hurting me yesterday. It would sometimes get out of hand and he would burn me pretty badly. I only got F4 scars from him. The rest are F from everyone else, Izuku explained. Kigo carefully contemplated how to go about this. He could either A, freak out and burn everyone who has ever wronged Izuku, or B, take this civilly and act mature. He quickly decided on option A. Alright, I'm murdering a bunch of people and no one can stop me. Izuku blanched at that. Kigo, no. That's against the law. Plus we have to meet up with Aunt Mitsuki today, he complained to the hero. That got Kigo to pause. Aunt Mitsuki? He grinned playfully. Izuku groaned in frustration. Sure, he was semi-ready to speak to Aunt Mitsuki, but the drive over to her house was incredibly silent and incredibly stressful. Izuku's nerves all began to build up as the car arrived. When it came to a full stop, Izuku had to force his legs to move out of the car. Kigo noticed and gave Izuku a reassuring smile. The two headed up to the front door step where Kigo rang the doorbell. Izuku didn't hear a noise when Kigo pressed the button, so he wondered if it didn't. Izuku, a loud voice rang out as the door flew open. Izuku was immediately enveloped in Mitsuki's arms as she squeezed him. Mitsuki quickly released him and supped to Kigo. So, you're the person who's been taking care of Izuku lately, to which Kigo could only nod. The two were quickly ushered into the house and sat down in the dining room. Mitsuki sat herself down in a chair and looked between the two. She let out a long, heartfelt sigh. So Izuku, care to explain why you didn't show up to school for almost 2 goddamn weeks? She questioned, eyes narrowing. Well, auntie, I ran away, he put out. Mitsuki blinked, once, then twice. You ran away? The words were soft and caring, a lot more than what Izuku had originally expected upon entering the household. Why, auntie? Izuku trailed off. Mitsuki liked to think that she knew Inko very well. She and Inko grew up side by side since they were toddlers. Sure, they got into the usual childhood fuckery, but that was expected. When they both had kids, Mitsuki and Inko were still like sisters. They shared everything about the two brats. Mitsuki had also expressed her concerns about Inko's deadbeat husband, who she claimed to have done a runner as soon as she got PR gin and tea. Mitsuki found that hard to believe, as Hisoshi Midoriya was a loyal man with a stable income. She really never saw why or how the man could possibly betray Inko like that. She vividly remembered her remark upon finding out, "That son of a bitch, I'm going to flay his corpse 6 ways from Sunday if his butt doesn't show back up to support you and the lil fucker." She remembered Inko laughing softly, reminding Mitsuki to watch her language around the kids. Did she? Hell no. Many things changed when Izuku and Katsuki turned 4 though. Katsuki had gotten his quirk a few days before his birthday. Explosions, of all the things the world could have cursed her with. She noticed how Inko grew increasingly worried as Izuku's birthday grew closer and there was still no sign of a quirk appearing. Then the doctor's visit happened. Inko had taken Izuku to the doctor to see if he was a late bloomer or not. To her dismay, Inko called later that night in a crying fit that Izuku was quirkless. Mitsuki simply didn't understand. Why the F is Inko crying to me like her child just effing died? Izuku was fine, so what if the brat didn't have a quirk? Izuku had an incredibly fearful determination, which Mitsuki assumed he got from his father, as Inko did not express that kind of confidence. Another thing she noticed was that Izuku looked a lot like his father. While you wouldn't be able to tell at first glance, as most people found Izuku and Inko to look similar, Izuku had very curly hair that displayed deep green colors, almost black, like Hisoshi. He had freckles that were scattered across his face, and lengthy limbs, just like Hisoshi. It was during this tough time that Inko began to speak to Mitsuki less and less. Mitsuki kept questioning whether or not Izuku still wanted to be a hero, only to get subtle subject changes away from the topic of the conversation. She also questioned whether or not Izuku was doing okay at school, to which her own brat would always find that Deku was doing good or Deku was still alive. She had a good idea that the nickname was given to Izuku by Katsuki. She didn't like it though, so she sat Katsuki down and explained to him that calling Izuku Deku was not okay. Mitsuki had even gone straight to the school, demanding answers. She had seen Izuku limping home one day with a bruise on his arm and a limp when he walked. She had just missed him as Izuku entered his house. "I'll call Inko later to make sure he's okay." But when she called, she simply got, "Yes, Izuku is fine, he's just hiding in his room again." The response was uncalled for and so uncaring Mitsuki noticed. So she then went to her brat again and asked if Izuku was okay at school. Yeah hag, Deku's been doing just fine. Mitsuki yet again got a careless remark. Finally, she stormed into the principal's office demanding answers. She did not get them. Mitsuki had driven herself straight to Aldera and marched right into the principal's office. The principal looked slightly surprised to see her but gave her a warm welcome and offered her a chair. She listened very closely as the principal seemed to go on and on about Katsuki, and how great he was, how great his quirk was. No wonder the demon brat comes home with such an inflated ego. She offhandedly thought. She listened for a good minute as the principal spoke about her son, only to then send the conversation into a total "actually, I came here to talk about Izuku Midoriya. I want to make sure he's doing alright." It seemed completely innocent, and Mitsuki just wanted to prove her theory wrong. Maybe everything was fine and she was overreacting about the whole thing. The principal tensed, but quickly regained himself, calling Izuku to the office. Sure enough, Izuku arrived not even 2 minutes later, completely unharmed and undamaged. Izuku did look scared to enter the principal's office, but that was to be expected of him. "Hey kiddo, just wanted to make sure you're doing okay at school," she had told him, ruffling his hair. "You have a good day now, alright?" she had told him before thanking the principal and leaving the school. Looking back now, Mitsuki realized she really should have dug deeper into the situation, because not too long after that, Katsuki came home complaining how Izuku hadn't shown up to school the entire week. Kigo watched as the woman in front of him seemed to come to a quick realization as to why Izuku ran away. "Has Inko ever laid her hands on you, Izuku?" Mitsuki asked with such a fury in her eyes, even seasoned villains would tremble. Kigo deeply inhaled and prayed for whatever soul would suffer Mitsuki's wrath. Izuku, however, seemed accustomed to this. "No, auntie, she just forgot I was there sometimes." Mitsuki did not relax at the comment, however, she did continue to press further. "What about at school? Has anyone ever hurt you at school?" Kigo saw how Izuku quickly tensed up, and that was all the confirmation that Mitsuki needed. The woman let out a low growl as she rubbed her temple. "Tell me who, I need to know exactly who hurt you, Izuku." Kigo had many fears in the world. While not as many as most, he's pretty sure even All Might would tremble beneath a deadly Bakugo Mitsuki. Izuku frowned and shook his head a little bit. "If it's okay auntie, I would rather refrain from answering to that." Izuku replied with a shaky voice. Kigo knew today was going to be horrible from the beginning of it. That did not stop him from learning 2 things. 1. Mitsuki Bakugo was a force of nature you should never upset, and 2. Mitsuki Bakugo was not a stupid person. She got exactly what she wanted to know by any means necessary, and right now, Kigo wished he never had to learn those things in the first place. Mitsuki placed her hands on the table in a surprisingly calm manner. She let out a sweet sigh before speaking. "Izuku effing Midoriya, I sweat to every deity that any one ever effing believed in, I will personally beat his but if he did what I think he did to you," she stated with such a low voice Kigo swore he heard the earth shake in fear. Izuku frowned and slumped farther into his chair. "Really auntie, kak. Bakugo wasn't the worst of them. He only left a few scars, and none of them were as bad as when I got beat up in the C corner of the C classroom that one day," he said with a wobbly smile. As if either one of them knew that he got beaten up in the classroom. Mitsuki let out an ear-piercing screech and erupted. "You mean to tell me that you got beat up in the middle of a classroom? Where the hell was the teacher?" "In the C classroom." "Holy effing shit, the teachers let that happen." She reverted back to the original tone she had been using. "Yes. The principal knew, didn't he?" "Yes." "What about Inko? Did Inko know?" "I tried to tell her about it once but she didn't do anything, told me I was being a baby." Izuku mumbled. Mitsuki leaned back into her chair. "I can't effing believe this. What do I even do?" "Izuku, honey, I am so sorry for all of the shit you put up with," she said softly to the greenette who had tears forming. Kigo fully agreed, no one deserved to be treated like that. Kigo wouldn't wish that kind of torture on his worst enemies. "If I may, Mrs. Bakugo." He was cut off by Mitsuki. Kid, you have every right to call me Mitsuki here. You took Izuku in and cared for him when no one else would, so stop acting so formal, she smiled briefly. Kigo nodded and continued. If I may, Mitsuki, I believe that we should shut all Dera schools down for severe quirk discrimination, discrimination against its students in general, severe lack of a bullying policy, and so on, he said as formally as his 18-year-old brain could muster. Mitsuki simply looked away from the table before returning to Kigo. What about my son? You can't expect me to let this slide, nor should you for that matter, she growled. Kigo sighed. In the end, a lot of it is up to Izuku. He could press charges if he wanted to, or he could likely get every single person in Old Dera sent straight to prison, he replied. Izuku flinched. Why would I send them to prison? Kigo frowned, as did Mitsuki. Izuku, they abused you in what was supposed to be a safe space for you. Not a single one of these people is getting off with a clean record. Kigo grumbled. Izuku had tears spewing from his eyes. I can't believe that they would do all that for me. Of course we would. Izuku, came Aunt Mitsuki's voice. Izuku frowned through the tears. Gotta stop saying everything out loud. Izuku honestly felt like he was in the Twilight Zone. I don't want to ruin Bibakugu's see chances of being a hero see completely. Izuku decided after a while. Kigo looked furious at that. Izuku had a gut feeling that Kigo was considering things no 18-year-old should consider. What I think we should do it. P put marks on his record. B bullying and harassment marks. C community service. C could also be one of them. I also think he should get severe anger management therapy. Izuku came up with. Mitsuki sighed and Kigo quirked an eyebrow. Are you sure that is all you want to do? Mitsuki asked, hinting slightly that she thought that was a tame answer. Kigo spoke next. I think he should be blacklisted from every hero school in the country. Izuku jerked backwards. No. We can't just eliminate his C chances completely, he cried. Kigo really did want to know that in God's name Izuku was thinking, specifically because, what kind of bull-headed person does it take to keep giving their abuser a second chance? He wanted to know, like genuinely. Anyone else would have a restraining order and the person thrown into jail, but no. Izuku had to be an actual saint with the smarts to take over the goddamn world. Kigo glared at Izuku. Well, we can't just keep giving him chances to make the same mistakes. Izuku. If he has done this shit his entire life, who's to say he won't do it again? If we put something on the L line that he truly cares about, he will learn to be better. If we just take it away without even telling him he was wrong in the first place, who's to say he won't become a villain? The word seemed to physically hurt Izuku. He will know exactly what he's done. That's what convicting people is for. You don't see any other case out here where the attempted murder gets off without a sentence. Kigo snapped back. And no, but as some of them get parole. Even then, he didn't try to murder me. Izuku cried with tears stirring his cheeks. Fine. Kigo finalized with his hand flying up in the air. If he leaves so much as a scratch on you, Izuku, I will not hesitate to lock his butt up for a long time, he growled. Mitsuki coughed from the corner. The two looked at her, suddenly remembering her existence. Sorry, they both mumbled. Kigo heard Mitsuki let out a long, but caring sigh. If I didn't know any better I'd say you two were brothers, she laughed a little. However, I do agree with Hawks to a degree, Izuku. You can't just let him off with such a tame punishment. If what I think he did is correct, then Katsuki needs severe punishment, and he needs to turn his life around if he wants to get into any high school, P.A.D. Izuku mutely nodded and sat back in his seat. Mitsuki went on, while I think it's a good idea to do all of the things you suggested, a form of supervision for a PRD of time would be desperately needed. Think of it like parole, just without the prior sentencing, she suggested. Kigo knew that there were many rehabilitation programs out there for villains, but how many were like that for minors whose sparkly clean records because of the sheet school they come from? He sighed and looked over at Izuku, who seemed distraught about the entire situation. Well, Mitsuki, I think we can arrange an agreement later. Right now we have to worry about removing Izuku from Midoriya Inko's custody before we can really do anything else, he smiled. Mitsuki hummed. Well, if you need me to provide anything, I've known Inko my whole life, and I'll be DM'd if I let him go back somewhere unsafe, she grinned. Kigo returned her smile and stood up. All right Izuku, we should head out, he said, lightly tapping Izuku's shoulder. The duo headed for the door and Izuku was the first person out. Kigo was about to leave when Mitsuki held him back. Hey, thank you for all you're doing for him, she smiled sadly. I'll be sure to inform my husband of the situation to see if he can do anything to help with his current situation, she said before waving him goodbye. Kigo promptly began the walk down the pathway. Hurry up. I thought hawks were supposed to be fast. Izuku shouted from the end of the path. Kigo smiled and picked up his pace, heading towards the city streets. Izuku knew that he would have to speak to his mother at some point. That didn't mean he wanted to though. It would be strange, getting to see how his mother spoke of him to others. He honestly didn't know. His mother was always gone, never home. Never looked at him, not even a glance. Sure, at one point it saddened Izuku, but now it was just reality. One thing was certain, he would not be returning to that house. He would go back to his home, because home was where family was. Izuku knew Inko was not family. Family cared about you and supported you. Uncle Masu and Aunt Mitsuki were family, Kigo was family. Izuku had learned a lot over the past week and a half. He learned that people were kind, people cared. Izuku had been following behind Kigo, and they were heading back to the police department. He couldn't help but smile. Kigo is going to request a formal look into Inko. He's going to get me away from her, away from them. Technically, Izuku should be in school right now, but he didn't think that he'd be returning for quite some time. Upon arriving at the police department, the receptionist looked up and smiled at them. Detective Tsukochi is down the hall in interrogation room 2 with Midoriya Inko. Kigo thanked the lady and Izuku held his breath. I am not ready for this. I am not ready to speak to my mother, let alone discuss the neglect she put me through. Izuku stopped when a bold 2 caught his eye. They had arrived at the interrogation room. Tsukochi Naomasa had been interrogating Midoriya Inko for the past half hour. He was getting no good answers. None to actually use against her in the court of law. He sighed. All right Mrs. Midoriya, you've said multiple times that Midoriya Izuku would never run away from home. However, we got a call from a Bakugo Mitsuki claiming that he hadn't shown up to school in a week. No calls to the school, no work collected. Like he just disappeared one day. Care to explain where he was then? 1. Thing Naomasa had found out about Midoriya Inko was that, unlike her son, she could lie flawlessly. It was a truly stunning talent as his quirk registered lies for everything that he so desperately wanted to believe was true. She would go on these little rants about how good he was at everything. Oh, you should see his grades in school. Top of his class. Lady, no one cares about his grades, not when you have a case building against you. Luckily for him, Hawks decided now would be a good time to knock on the door. Naomasa welcomed Hawks into the room and Mrs. Midoriya looked baffled, but still held a strong smile. Now Mrs. Midoriya, going back to the question you failed to answer, Bakugo Mitsuki reported Midoriya Izuku missing after him not showing up to school for a week. Mrs. Midoriya gasped a little. Oh, well I'm sure it's just teenage rebellion, you know? Boys will be boys, she chuckled. Naomasa sighed. No, he did not in fact know why skipping school for a week straight was just boys being boys. He himself would be far more concerned than what Mrs. Midoriya was showing. The woman seemed to hold such a bright personality, he understood why people would see her as a good mother, but what kind of mother forgets their child? Naomasa frowned and looked at the notepad. Mrs. Midoriya, are you aware of the abuse your son endures during school hours? He asked, causing quite the reaction from the woman. What? That couldn't be right, Izuku always talks about all his friends from school, she smiled. Lie. Naomasa wanted to flip this lady over the table. Apparently so did Hawks, who sat patiently in the corner of the room. He silently prayed for a fresh batch of coffee after this. Lord knows how much he'll need it. Mrs. Midoriya, my quirk is lie detector, and it appears you have lied, he frowned at the woman. Kigo did not think he was mature whatsoever, but right now in this room, he was the most goddamn mature adult you'd find on this side of the planet. He had listened as Midoriya and Tsukochi spoke back and forth. He was very aware that Midoriya should have at least a little insight as to the abuse at school. Izuku said so himself, stating that Midoriya told him to stop being such a baby. It took so much willpower to not throw hands right then and there. The audacity this woman had, to sit there, in front of the detective with a lie-detecting quirk, and tell him she did not know. That Izuku had not once told her about the horrible things he lived through. It offended Kigo, really, it did. To think he had spent the last week and a half with Izuku and not know at least a little about him. The woman didn't even react when the detective told her about his quirk. Kigo sighed, perhaps he should intervene. Midoriya, I found your son roaming the streets at 11 o'clock at night. He has been staying with me ever since. During that time I also discovered your son had scars from his own classmates. So please explain how. You had no clue, whatsoever, as to what he suffered through. Kigo growled, gripping the armrests of the chair. Who are you and what right do you have to even begin speaking to me like Tiosh? Hawks grabbed his wallet. I love this part, he grinned. Number 9 Hero Hawks, Mrs. Midoriya. Inko Midoriya quickly snapped her mouth shut, clearly she saw herself in a bad situation. What was the question again? She asked more meekly this time. Kigo smirked in satisfaction. He knew it was rather unprofessional to grin as people were being interrogated in front of you, but let him have a little fun. Tsukochi quickly took back over the investigation, also seeming to notice that Midoriya had realized she had no power here. Now, Mrs. Midoriya, is it true you have failed to provide your son with proper support over the last 8 years? He asked as his eyes met hers. Midoriya faltered and paled a little. I have given him everything he needs to survive. I hardly see how I failed as a parent detective, she spat out venomously. Survive being the key word here, Mrs. Midoriya. A child needs love and support from a parental figure in their life, not just basic necessities. Tsukochi sighed. Kigo watched, truly bewildered at the woman. How the F do people think like this? He growled to himself. Tsukochi carried on, Mrs. Midoriya, I believe that you fail to see what you are doing here is classified as neglecting your child. There are serious consequences for such things, you know. It is not my fault he ended up quirkless, she suddenly spit out. Kigo flinched a little. He did not expect this woman to downright admit she believed something was wrong with her son. Which was false. Izuku is a blessing upon this earth, you devil woman. It appeared that was not all Midoriya had to say though. He didn't provide anything, he's the reason my husband left me, and he has been spoiled since the day he was diagnosed. You think it's easy being a single mother? A single mother with a quirkle dash. I'm going to stop you right there, Midoriya. Kigo cut her off. Izuku has proven capable of incredible things, he is smart and kind. You also should not blame a child for your husband ditching you, he sneered at her. Kigo had to recompose himself. I wish I was old enough to legally drink. He thought, reminding himself he was indeed 18 and still too young to down an entire bottle of tequila, legally at least. He clenched his teeth and saw Midoriya's eyes narrow at him. You're doing this for publicity, aren't you? You save the quirkless kid, and all of a sudden you have eyes on you. All the fame you could want, right? She snapped back at him. Izuku was not supposed to be listening to what was happening, but no one told him not to. It'll be fine, I already know most of the shit she'll spew. That was mostly the case, mostly. He had frozen when she called him Kigo's pity case. Kigo wasn't like that. Kigo wasn't like them. Right? Izuku had to list off every good thing Kigo had done in the past week and a half. It was a really long list. He tuned back into the audio. Zuku is most certainly not, and never will be a pity case. I think you lack the proper brain to realize that he has more potential than most heroic students right now. Kigo had shouted. Izuku felt touched. Kigo did not consider him a pity case. Thank God for that. I don't think I could stand another betrayal. He sighed, slumping in the chair. The bickering continued for what seemed like eons. Eventually he heard the words he'd been waiting to hear his entire life. Midoriya Inko, under the Hero Commission child safety laws, if a pro-hero deems a home unfit for a child to reside in, they have every right to remove that child from said home. Midoriya Izuku will no longer be in your custody as declared by number 9 hero, Hawks. Tsukochi finalized. Izuku had never felt more free in his life. Inko did not put up a fight when signing over custody of Izuku. Originally, Tsukochi was just going to send Izuku to a foster home. It was typical with cases like this. He had no family to take him, dad was seemingly non-existent, no family that could take him in, and they were not sending him into Mitsuki's custody while Katsuki was there. Izuku could only look back and forth as the adults talked, meaning Tsukochi had stepped out of the room to speak with Kigo. Izuku sighed, he missed his notebook. He missed his computer and doing absolutely nothing but work for an entire day. This was boring, he needed something to do. He looked around the room where there appeared to be relatively nothing, then, he found the cameras. Oh, that could be fun. Naomasa had stepped out of the room to discuss Izuku's options. Midoriya Inko had willingly given up custody of Izuku, so what do we do with him now? Based on the looks of it, Hawks already had several options laid out. So, typically with a situation like this, we would send the kid into foster care. However, Izuku seems like a more special case, he said, gesturing to Hawks. The hero sighed, I do have ideas for what we could do with him. He's been working under me for my agency lately, and I am a legal adult. Naomasa paused, taking in the information. He's been working for you? Hawks nodded. Really good at his job too, been doing the analysis since the other guy got fired. He's been the one sending in all those reports. Naomasa blanched. Hawks nodded. It really just kinda happened, he let me read some of his notebooks. Kid's been doing it as a freelance and has recently opened up to other agencies. Naomasa did know about the new analyzer that had just appeared, and had a quick rise to popularity with Hawks backing them up. Now knowing that it was a 12-year-old kid was a whole new thing. Sure, professional analyzers were good at their jobs, but the kid was a whole new level of talented. He was quick, efficient, and had charged lower than the average analyzer. The kid was 12 and doing better than a professional. Naomasa let that sink in for a minute. He blinked back to reality. What did you say about you being a legal adult? He asked. Hawks looked back to him. Well, because I am a legal adult I should be able to get custody. I have a stable job dash. I'm going to stop you right there. Naomasa sighed. Foster care agencies will do anything to get the kid because of your job. Typically when you are a hero, you have a dangerous job. Your dangerous job immediately puts the kid in an unsafe environment, not to mention you could just be doing this as a publicity stunt. The young hero took in this information and frowned. Izuku isn't even 13, so he can't really get a say in custody choices here, Hawks pondered. Naomasa nodded. It was clear Hawks could be capable of taking care of the child, but he wondered. What if you just adopted him? Naomasa suggested. Hawks paused, and then panicked a little. I understand that taking custody as a foster care situation is one thing, but that would mean he would stay with me permanently. What if I do some dumb shit and end up in prison? Somewhere where he is legally my brother and I can't just send him somewhere safe, like back to a foster home. What if I somehow get caught up in some great scheme and I can't keep him with me? I am not permanent guardian material, he protested. Naomasa was conflicted. You have had the kid for almost 2 weeks, already got attached, not to mention you were very open to the idea of taking custody of him, which is just the same as adopting, just adopting is more permanent, so any foster care agency can't just take him whenever you get so much as a scrape in the line of duty. Also, if you only have custody, if Midoriya Inko is deemed well enough, she can take Midoriya back at any given moment, no questions asked. That seemed to seal the deal. Hawks just sighed and nodded. All right, I can adopt him, if that's the best option. Hawks sighed. Naomasa smiled and nodded. Kigo sighed, sure it had barely been 2 weeks since he met the kid, but Izuku had quickly become a natural part in his life. The kid had his own room basically, and it would just be a more permanent deal. Now, how do I explain to a child that I am adopting them as my new little brother? Kigo opened the door to the interrogation room and found Izuku on his phone. What are you doing? He questioned the latter. Izuku's head snapped up and he nearly dropped his phone. Nothing, he smiled. You are a sheet liar, Izuku, Don't forget that, he deadpanned. Izuku nodded, and glanced around the room. I broke into their security system, he laughed meekly. Kigo wanted to simultaneously punch the wall and curl up under a table. Now, why would you do that? Kigo sighed. Izuku just shrugged. I got bored, and I needed something to do, he replied simply. You are so damn lucky I'm adopting you, he snapped. Back. Izuku snickered then stopped. His face blanked out. You're what? He all but screeched. Kigo began laughing. Who's gonna take care of your dumbass? But, why? Izuku cried. What else am I gonna do? Kigo stated obviously. Izuku had tears coming down his face now. Kigo panicked. Shit, was this not what he wanted? Izuku dropped his phone and hugged Kigo. Why, you're happy? Izuku nodded. Why, yeah. Kigo signed in relief. Oh, thank God. Izuku snickered, tears still streaming down his face. Phew, well, I got to patrol in an hour, so we should head back home. Kigo laughed a little. Izuku nodded and they left the station for the apartment. Kigo had left Izuku back at the house while he patrolled. I mean, it's not like he could take a 12-year-old on patrol. It was a relatively slow day on his patrol route, nothing out of the ordinary. You had 1 to 2 muggers every now and then. Jesus, people got mugged a lot. However, one thing that did stick out was the sudden flash of fire, then it was gone. Kigo flew down to the alleyway that produced the flame. He was expecting to see a villain. In all honesty, it wasn't uncommon for villains to have a fire quirk. What he was not expecting was to see a man that was covered head to toe in scars having a fight with a house cat. Ah, sir? You seem to be struggling there, Kigo commented, trying not to laugh. Come on, rescuing cats is hard AF. The other replied quickly. Kigo rolled his eyes and crouched down. Come here, kitty, he said, holding out his hand. The calico cat looked over to Kigo and came to him without a second thought. The man on the other side of the alleyway looked utterly betrayed. Bestiary cat, he grumbled. Kigo laughed and held the cat, stroking its fur. You probably have a shitty personality for a cat to reject you like that. The man frowned. I am the nicest person on the face of the planet, he replied. Sure, January. Kigo smirked. I am not January. Then maybe I can get a name? Hell no, I don't know you. Yeah, but you should thank your saviors at least. You didn't save nobody. I saved you from the cat. It's a cat. Yet you still lost to it. No. Yes. No. Name. Darby. Kigo grinned as the other realized what had happened. Kigo had heard that name before. Where have I heard the name Darby? It wasn't any hero name he'd heard of, and it was definitely not a real name. Oh. The man, Darby, groaned, laying down on the ground. So, this is where vigilante work has gotten you, heh? The hero grinned. Darby's head had shot up and looked perplexed before realizing who he was talking to. Sheet. Kigo merely shrugged. You gonna answer me? Are you going to arrest me? Darby snapped back. Tempting, but I wanna know how an elusive vigilante gets into a fight with a cat. Well, I'm not telling you, Sheet. Darby decided. Wow, rude much? Come on, man. I need some excitement while I'm here. Shouldn't you return to patrol? I also should be arresting you, but I'm not doing either. Currently. Darby opened his mouth to speak, only to close it again. Kigo stood up and proceeded to drop the cat on Darby's lap. The cat did not run away this time. You're an odd hero. You're a vigilante, Kigo stated. Darby held the cat and the two sat in silence for a minute. Kigo looked at his phone. Ah, well, my patrol ends soon, so I gotta get back to my house. You seem to be in a hurry, the vigilante noted. Kigo just nodded. Yeah, popular to contrary belief, I have a life outside of being Hawks. Dimon, if your patrol ends this early, what do you do with the rest of the time? Darby asked. If you're so curious, I could take you to the police station and we could talk there. Kigo suggested. Darby frowned. No, I think I'll actually go now, he said, standing up, the cat squirming in his arms. Kigo shrugged. Fair enough, if anyone asks, I'll just say I had a run-in with a cat, he replied. Darby turned around to walk away, then, thanks for not arresting me, I guess. Kigo nodded and turned around to finish his patrol, leaving the vigilante behind. Izuku had been minding his own business when Kigo burst through the door. Izuku nearly fell off the couch. Keikijo, he screamed. Kigo immediately groaned upon entering the living room. You would not believe the patrol I just had, he groaned. Oh, was all Izuku could reply. Kigo nodded. Remember the vigilante I told you a while back with blue flames? If not I did, but I ran into him on patrol. Izuku nodded and gestured for him to continue. Well, I came across an alleyway that had previously gone up in flames and found the guy in a fight with a cat. He laughed. It was so bizarre to find a vigilante that is so hard to catch fighting a cat. Kigo wheezed. Izuku just nodded. You let him go, he concluded. Kigo laughed awkwardly. I mean, he didn't seem like a bad guy. Just a little misguided. Izuku stared straight into Kigo's eyes. What you mean to say is you thought he was hot and decided why you didn't want him in prison. Kigo blanched through one of the couch pillows at Izuku's head. Brat. I did not, and I tried very hard to get him to the police station. Yes, because he is currently in C custody. Izuku snickered, dodging the pillow. No. He was very hard to catch. He was fighting a sea cat in an alleyway. Izuku was laughing hard now. Kigo frowned and sunk into the couch. I am not feeding you katsudon for the rest of the year, brat. Kigo. You can't deny me that. I was stating facts. Well, screw you and your facts. Kigo laughed. Izuku pouted from his spot on the couch. I'm no longer doing your analysis, unlike you, I have options, he smirked. Fine, you get your katsudon, and you don't blacklist me, he compromised. Okay, but why didn't you get him into custody? You have one of the higher capture rates among heroes. Izuku asked. Kigo shrugged. Like I said, he wasn't a bad guy, just a little misguided. I think he's been doing good with his job. Izuku nodded. You are right about that, but vigilantism is a very fine line to walk. It's one of the main sources of villains. People become a vigilante then descend into villainy. Kigo knew this, of course he did. Darby didn't seem that way when he met him. God, how I want to believe he won't ever become a villain, but he knew that it was possible. He knew he could have just let a villain go. He looked down guiltily. Izuku sighed. I'm sure it'll be fine. If he's as great as you say he is, then you must have incredibly low standards. Kigo sighs. I get it, I made a stupid decision, what have you done while I've been gone? Izuku grinned madly. I have managed to hack into UA. You said I did something bad. Kigo screamed. I'm kidding, I don't have those kinds of abilities. I did however get an email from UA, he responded. Kigo honestly wished Izuku had hacked into you. Why did UA email you? Izuku shrugged. Not me specifically, but Nedzu wanted to speak to my online unnamed persona in person. Kigo really wanted to pass out right then and there. Nedzu wanted to meet with your online persona, because of the week you have had to gain reputation in the hero community. Yes. Are you going to meet with him? Of course. We have a meeting at a cafe next week on Saturday. Izuku happily responded. So, how do you know it's actually Nedzu? Kigo asked. Sue him, he was concerned. Well, I don't, and it is super sketchy, but you have find my phone on your phone, so if I do end up being kidnapped then you will be able to find my last known location. Izuku smiled. Kigo sighed. This kid. What time is the meeting? Supposed to be at noon, he responded. Okay, I have patrol that day so I can get someone else to drop you off. Kigo told him. Izuku nodded. I didn't even know you had friends. Of course I have. Friends, just not typical friends. They're acquaintances who are heroes, and I have met with them a few times. Kigo gave in. Izuku smirked. Alright, you go have one of your friends come pick me up, definitely won't die then. Kigo groaned. Oh my god, I'm having best genius do your hair if you keep this up. Please do, I would love to see Best Jeanist lose his temper. Izuku laughed. Izuku, I am murdering you in your sleep, he threatened. Yes please, I welcome death with open arms. You are way too young to have any teenage angst. I have been forced to grow up a little faster than other kids, so please forgive me. Izuku snaped. Kigo shut his mouth right there. Sheet, sorry for bringing that up. S'fine, I just got mad, sorry. Izuku apologized. You shouldn't apologize for the sheet people you had growing up. Kigo reminded him. Izuku nodded and resumed his work. Kigo frowned. You know you could probably make some friends if you actually got outside. Yes, because everyone flocks to befriend the quirkless kid. Izuku deadpanned. I'm just saying that there are people in similar situations. I remember this one kid from my class at Shiketsu was told they had a useless quirk, and was able to force the truth out of people. She is a great underground hero now. Kigo said. Izuku took note of that. Fine, I bet 1,000 yen that I will walk around the city tomorrow and find no one my age willing to even speak to me after learning I'm quirkless. He held out his hand. Kigo immediately took it. I however, bet 3,000 yen that you will at least make an acquaintance, he grinned, shaking it. So, this means I have to take a break from my work. Izuku looked over at his desk. Oh my god, why do you think I'm having you do this? You're 12, you shouldn't focus your entire life around a freelance job that you don't even actually do half the time. You sit there and analyze everything, and you need a break. Kigo lectured him. Wow, okay mom. Gonna set a bedtime now? Izuku asked. Yes, in fact your bedtime is right now and you will spend the entire day tomorrow outdoors, getting sunlight. Kigo emphasized. Izuku frowned and trotted off to the guest room in defeat. Sheet, we still gotta collect his stuff from his mom's house. Kigo thought. Izuku woke up early that morning, earlier than he would have liked. It was currently 6, and he had started a pot of coffee. Kigo usually got up earlier than this, but today he was not. Izuku wondered if he just wanted to make sure he actually ended up leaving the house. Sure enough, Kigo soon had left his room in his hero outfit. You gonna patrol all day today? He asked. Kigo nodded. Gotta make sure the city isn't being overrun by villains and such, he yawned tiredly. Izuku leaned against the counter watching the coffee pour into the pot. You really didn't have enough money to get one of those fancy ones where you put the tiny cups in? He asked Kigo. Kigo stuck out his tongue. I did, but they are always so watered down. I like my coffee stronger than All Might. Izuku chuckled and poured the coffee. So, I guess I have to leave the house today, he frowned. Kigo lightly pushed him. Of course, you're gonna go and make friends. He enthusiastically encouraged Izuku. Izuku suppressed the urge to sigh. All I have to do is find one person to tolerate me. Kigo, I haven't found one person who tolerates me in 12 years of living. That is a lie, and I am offended. Kigo gasped. Izuku rolled his eyes. It's different. How so? Kigo inquired. Well, you're basically my older brother, especially now, you're not like all the kids my age. Izuku mumbled. Kigo pulled Izuku into a hug. I'm positive that there is one person whom you will be able to befriend, if not I'm losing 3,000 yen, so you better befriend the F out of someone by the end of the day. Oh my god Kigo, you're a top 10 hero, money is not a concern for you. Izuku laughed. Now that you're feeling bad, get out of the house. Before I kick you out, he grinned, releasing Izuku from the hug. Izuku nodded, chugged down his coffee, and headed for the door. As soon as the door clicked shut, it opened again. Kigo, I don't have any money. Izuku said, poking his head through the door. Kigo sighed, and grabbed 2,000 yen. Here you go brat, he said, handing Izuku the money. Thank you. I'll pay you back with the money you lose, he shouted before running out of the door. Izuku was walking down the street. In all honesty, it was a dumb bet. Who the hell would want to befriend the quirkless kid? I mean, Izuku had lost every one of the friends by the age of 4, so he had a good idea of how many people would even stick around him long enough to chat. Those people were Kigo, along with Aunt Mitsuki and Uncle Masaru. The first place Izuku decided would be a good spot to hunt for friends was the local cat cafe. It was small but well known. It had a large number of people during the early morning hours. Izuku did see some people his age, but they looked rather unapproachable. The self-proclaimed ringleader was a girl with bright blue hair and fully black eyes. The second was a boy with glasses and bat-like features, including larger ears, fangs, oddly shaped nose, and god-awful eyesight. The third, and final person, was another girl with a levitation quirk, like his mother, but much stronger. She appeared to be floating her friends. They were all laughing about school or something. Izuku stopped listening after they had started talking about some, and he quotes, lame-ass wannabe hero. Izuku had reached the front of the line where a barista stood. She had long pink hair that extended in all different places, like it was levitating. She simply smiled at him. Hiya! What can I get you today? She asked, grabbing a pen with her hair. Ah, so that's her quirk. Izuku looked at the menu. Can I get a chai latte? He asked. The woman nodded. What size can I get you? Just a small, he shrugged. The woman grabbed a small cup and wrote down the order. Name? Midoriya Izuku, he responded. That'll be 423 yen Midoriya. Okay, he threw out one of the bills Kigo had given him. Your order will be out soon Midoriya, she grinned, and Izuku handed her the money. Izuku had sat down at a table next to one of the cats. It was a lovely pastel calico that had been sleeping, apparently. He looked at the cat, only to find that she had been awake with her eyelids barely open. Sneak. He thought and looked at the collar around her neck. Pastel, it read. Wow, you got some real original people naming you here, he laughed, petting the cat's head. It wasn't even 5 minutes later when his latte was brought to him by an employee. Izuku happily took the caffeine, and proceeded to sit there next to Pastel. So, I made this bet with my brother, that I couldn't make an acquaintance by the end of the day. I need your opinion, he asked the cat who looked lazily up at him. The cat meowed, rubbed her cheek against his hand. Izuku sighed. Does he win the bet if I have become friends with a cat? He asked the calico. I would assume so, came a voice from behind Izuku. Izuku immediately spun around and near-decked the person behind him. Sheet, sorry for scaring you. The person said, backing up a bit. Izuku looked at a boy his age with crazy purple hair and lavender eyes. Holy! Don't you have a better way to approach strangers? He asked. You were just talking to a cat, the other quipped. Izuku rolled his eyes. Look, I have a bet with my brother to see if I can make an acquaintance by the end of the day, and I'm trying to avoid him winning, so you can go speak to someone worth your time. Ah, you look like you have a lot of friends though, the boy replied. You look like you have a healthy sleep schedule. Izuku deadpanned. The boy snickered and sat down in the chair in front of him. Damn it, Izuku groaned internally. This is Pastel, she's always here whenever I come. The boy spoke before taking a sip from his black coffee. How do you drink that? Pure spite, the purple boy replied. I have got to stop that. Izuku offhandedly noted. Shinsu Hitoshi, the boy held out his hand. Izuku looked at it for a minute. Is this some kind of joke? He said hesitantly. Shinsu ped his head to the side. I mean, maybe I'm trying to sell you to villains, you don't know these kinds of things, he said, still holding out his hand. Izuku slowly took it. Izuku Midoriya. Shinsu nodded, and Pastel had rolled over on her belly as Shisu pet her. So, Shinsu began. I haven't had a friend since I was 4. Izuku blurted out suddenly. Shinsu slowly blinked. It almost seems as if he's surprised. Well, neither have I. I'm assuming it was quirk-related, he cautiously questioned. Izuku confirmed with the nod of his head. Something like that, he said slowly. I have a villainous quirk. Shinsu said with venom in his tone. Izuku stared at him for a long moment. It was then that Izuku's brain began to suddenly light up. He has asked one question since this entire conversation began. Usually there's a lot more questions, even than the one he did ask he was extremely cautious about. His voice is rough, like he doesn't use it much. There are also scars on his cheeks, like a muzzle was put there. He must have a verbal quirk. Izuku concluded. You're staring at me. Shinsu observed, which, no sheet Sherlock. You have a verbal quirk, Izuku stated suddenly. Shinsu flinched and looked awkwardly at the other. I don't like to talk about it. Izuku understood, he really did, but goddamn curiosity got the better of him. You know, verbal quirks are rather hard to come by and rather effective, just look at present MIC for example. He is incredibly loud and he's one of the better heroes out there, Izuku said, leaning forward. Shinsu nodded, yeah, I know. I did observe you avoided asking me any questions. Izuku pressed a little more. Shinsu narrowed his eyes. Is this how you greet everyone you meet? Izuku shrugged. His head was immediately enveloped in fog. It's kind of relaxing. He then realized he couldn't move his body, this must be Shinsu's quirk. It was quite interesting to be under such a mist, then he felt his hand move and began to pet the cat. The fog disappeared, and Izuku was a little disappointed. Holy hell, you must work miracles for panic attacks, Izuku commented immediately. Apparently, Shinsu had not been expecting this response. What? He stuttered. You're not scared? Izuku realized what Shinsu was referring to when he said villainous quirk. Wow, F everybody who told him that. Shinsu began laughing hard. Izuku realized he had yet again spoken his thoughts aloud. You are very strange, Midoriya. Izuku smiled a little. You know, I think it's a gift. Shinsu nodded. Well, I showed you my quirk, I think it's only fair you show me yours. Well, I can't. Izuku frowned. Shinsu looked a little stunned by this. Is it a mental quirk? Izuku laughed. I wish, but no. I'll give you 2 more guesses. A mutation quirk. Shinsu tried again. No, sir. I don't know, my god. You don't have one, do you? Shinsu realized. Izuku was actually really proud of him, not many people even considered that an option. Kudos to you, not many people think I should even exist, therefore throwing the possibility out the window. So, that's a nice change. Izuku smiled brightly. He and Shinsu had continued talking and eventually exchanged numbers. Izuku had talked about how he lived with his brother, and Shinsu with his adoptive dads. Soon enough Izuku realized it was 3 in the afternoon. How have we not been kicked out yet? He wondered. Shinsu shrugged, but looked at his phone. I've got to get home. I'll see you some other time, Midoriya. Shinsu had said before getting up to leave. Yeah, see you later, Shinsu. Izuku responded before getting up to leave as well. On the way back to the apartment Izuku stopped dead in his tracks. Welp, I just lost 1,000 yen. Upon re-entering the house Izuku found no one in sight. Kigo must be patrolling. Izuku darted to the kitchen to get some water, replaying today's events. He'd made one whole friend. Izuku could only stare as that really hit him. Oh my god, 8 years. 8 years. I finally have a friend. Izuku grinned and pulled out his phone. He had a new message. Chicken, you back home yet? Ye, just got back bush. Chicken, K, don't commit any crimes before I get back. I make no promises. Bush. Izuku sat down on the couch and turned on the TV, switching it to the news channel. It was going over the hero rankings, what would come next. Yada, yada, Izuku looked down to his notebook. I can gather a sheet ton of information on their quirk from this. He scribbled down his observations from the clips of a rather famous hero, Miruko. The hero was ranked at number 7, and had quite the astounding quirk. Izuku recognized her from multiple raids. She was quite the amazing hero when he thought about it. Her quirk, Rabbit, allowed for her to have rabbit-like abilities. Izuku scratched words down on his notebook as multiple clips of her recent takedowns played. Soon enough the channel had gone through multiple heroes, Gang Orca, Best Jeanist, Endeavor, and All Might, to name a few. He looked up as the clip cut to Kigo during one of his takedowns. We now will talk about the upcoming, number 8 hero, Hawks, the news broadcaster stated. Izuku nearly dropped his pencil. Kigo rose up in the ranks. He watched as the 2 broadcasters spoke back and forth about the hero's quick rise to fame, along with talking about how young he was. Sure, it was well known that Hawks was an incredibly young hero, especially to have risen up the ranks as quickly as he was. He quickly opened up to his page on Kigo, comparing his knowledge to what the news knew. It was kind of funny, when he looked at his notes he saw detailed descriptions of his most successful attacks, compared to his least successful attacks. The news broadcaster was going over some of his least successful, but most flashy attacks. Izuku hated that. They only focused on what made the hero look good, got the audience going. He sighed. He would kill to get some broadcasters that focused on actual tactics and strategies of the hero, that would also be incredibly useful to villains if that information was handed out, Izuku's brain reasoned. Yes, while that was true, Izuku couldn't help but want. Kigo burst through the door not even 10 seconds later, a wicked grin on his face. So, I won the bet. Izuku looked Kigo up and down. Did you follow me? No, but I happened to be passing by a nice cat cafe, you know, he seemed like a nice boy. Kigo grinned. You openly admit to spying on me? You never denied making a friend. Kigo grinned. Stalker! Come on, tell me about him. No. Yes. No. Yes. No. Kigo rolled his eyes. I will just go ask him myself then. You don't even know where he lives. Izuku retorted. You don't know that. Kigo responded. It was true, Izuku did not know that. For all he knew, Kigo could just abduct anyone he pleased and ask them if they had met with one Izuku Midoriya at some point between the last week. Fine, he was nice. Happy? Izuku gave in and pulled 1,000 yen from his pocket. No, I want to hear everything. Kigo said, taking the money. You're treating this like it was a date, he deadpanned. It could have been. Kigo snorted. No. It was not. I will tell you about my day if you promise to leave me alone, he said, shoving Kigo. Kigo sighed and let up. Izuku proceeded to sit down and began to talk about his day. Kigo listened happily as Izuku went on about his day. Eventually Izuku stopped and realized something. You went up in the rankings. Today. He watched as Kigo frowned, deeply, he might add. Yeah, never really cared for that, he grumbled. Izuku nodded. I can understand why. They only talked about your flashy moves, which are less effective, might I add. You've been analyzing my attacks. Kigo quirked an eyebrow. Izuku nodded and showed him the pages of his notebook. Kigo was very happy to know Izuku had made a friend that day, but he was now reading through the notes Izuku compiled on him. Kigo knew he was smart, because yes, there is a difference between being an idiot and being dumb. Eventually he got to the recent pages, which were an entire psychological breakdown. Jesus Izuku, you've been with me for 2 weeks. How the hell do you know all this? Well, I've just noticed certain things about you. It's something I picked up from being in school. Everyone works in a certain way. You really pick up on that, he trailed off. See, everyone has this certain way they think, ideals and morals. You know? So you find those, you find what makes them tick, what gets them angry, what doesn't. I have noticed after being around you for 2 weeks, people at my school were shitty liars, he finalized. Kigo laughed at that. What makes you so sure they are shit? Because you are good at it. Izuku replied. He did not know how to respond to that. Yes, he had been trained to lie flawlessly, but usually people don't notice that. How are you so god-awful at lying, but you can tell when other people are lying? Izuku looked at him funny. I have no clue if people are lying or not, I just noticed you haven't lied to me yet, so I just assumed you're good at it. Kigo had to admit, that was some solid reasoning, even if it was very faulty. Maybe, I'm just the most truthful being on the face of the earth, and you didn't know it. Oh yes, because the number 8 hero has had no reason to lie whatsoever in his career. Izuku snorted. All Might hasn't lied. Kigo reasoned. All Might has probably lied about his entire quirk down to his very life. No one knows his identity, where he lives, not even his favorite color. However, All Might seems like he'd be a shitty liar. Izuku laughed. Kigo sighed, DMN this kid. Anyway, you have your meeting with Nedzu on Saturday, and I wanted to go over a training schedule with you. Izuku groaned but gave in and followed Kigo out the door of the apartment. The days had come and gone, rather slowly. Izuku suffered every single day since Kigo announced training. While Kigo went on patrol, he'd have Izuku go through a list of exercises and workout routines for an hour of his day. He had said something about easing him into a harder schedule. At least today he would get off the hook with his meeting. Kigo had said that he'd have one of his hero friends come pick him up, so that was what he was waiting for. It was 11:20 when a knock on the door sounded. Izuku got himself off the couch to peek through the peephole. He peered through and, holy shit, that's Miruko. Izuku caught himself fanboying before the hero knocked again. Izuku quickly opened the door, still a little starstruck. "Ah, you're the boy Takomi was talking about," she quickly observed him. "Why's, that'd be me, miss," he looked up at her. She snorted and held out her hand, "Rumi Usajiyama." Izuku nodded and took it. "Midoriya Izuku, I thought you didn't work with any other heroes." "Having one dumbass that I owe a favor is very different from working with them," she growled a little. Izuku nodded. "Alright, well, thank you for taking me. Although I would have been fine with walking on my own." Usajiyama frowned at that. "I've heard quite the earful from Brit Boy, and completely agree letting a 12-year-old meet someone claiming to be Nedzu is incredibly sketchy. In all fairness, he does not know I am 12. Izuku smiled. Usajiyama sighed. "Come on kid, I don't have all day," she said, leading him out of the apartment to her car. On the way there, Izuku couldn't help but ask questions. "So, if you are like a rabbit, do you have vision like one? I mean, I would assume not because a rabbits aren't pretersand humans dash." "Whoa, kid. That's a lot of words right there." "No, I do not have rabbit vision." "That would a CK," she laughed a little. Izuku nodded, and Usajiyama looked at him. "I get you're supposed to be the sheet, but like, what do you even do?" Izuku did feel a little offended, but not hurt. "I just do analysis. I'm working on other things, but that would be the main one." "That's it," she blinked. "Must be one hell of an analyzer then." Izuku nodded. "That's what everyone keeps telling me." "Well, you've got Nedzu's attention, supposedly. Even if he is the real deal, that is no small feat," she said approvingly. Izuku nodded again and looked out the window of the car. They were approaching the cafe where he was supposed to meet someone. He was indeed happily surprised to get a ping from his phone along with the sight of the principal in one of the booths by the window. "Holy shit, well DMN. Good luck kid, you have Takomi's number if you end up dying," she smirked, unlocking the doors to let Izuku out. Izuku thanked her and looked at his phone. "Unknown, good to see you made it safely, although you are younger than I originally imagined." Izuku pocketed his phone and opened the door. It was a rather slow day in the cafe, and there didn't seem to be anyone noticing the rodent. Must be because he isn't widely known, even as the principal of UA. Izuku made eye contact with Nedzu and sat down opposite him in the booth. The principal smiled. "What am I? A bear? A mouse? A dog? What matters is I am the principal, and you," he paused for effect, "have caught my attention." He held out a paw. Izuku shook it. "Izuku Midoriya, sir." Nedzu nodded, and took a sip of the tea he was holding. "Now, I assume you have no clue as to why I'm here." Izuku nodded. Nedzu continued. "Well, I am not one to take interest in humans, as you may or may not know. However, just a week and a half ago, a mystery analyzer appeared on scene, producing quite astounding reports and breakdowns in what I may find in a rather effortless manner." Izuku hummed, fidgeting the knapsack he'd brought with him. "Now, I understand these are less than desirable meeting arrangements, but I do have a proposition for you. We'll get into that later. For now, I'd like to see if you have any of your reports on hand." Nedzu asked. Izuku quickly reached into the knapsack and pulled out one of his completed notebooks. It was number 15. In the 2 weeks he'd been at Kigo's, he'd had enough time to fill up one more, going on second. It was incredible how much information he'd been taking in over the last 2 weeks. Nedzu gratefully took the book and opened it. Izuku watched as the rodent turned the pages, absorbing all of the information. A woman walked over and looked at Izuku. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked politely. Just water. Izuku responded. The woman nodded and walked away. Izuku grew increasingly worried. Nezu had gotten through about half of it, he's probably just glazing over it. Izuku wondered whether that was bad or good. The woman returned with a cup of water. Izuku thanked her. Nezu finally looked up with a glint in his eyes that sent shivers down Izuku's spine. Well, Mr. Midoriya, he snapped the book closed. I am rather astounded to find your reports have been holding out on your raw analysis, he cheered. Izuku looked at him and took a sip of his water. You see, most of your reports have gone above and beyond what you are asked to report, but you never said anything about breaking down their personalities, backgrounds, possible future careers. You have it all in this. Izuku, for the first time ever, felt like the creature in front of him could be the sole cause of his death. Forget everyone else, Nezu was terrifying. Izuku wondered what that meant for him. Now, I still have the offer I wanted to give to you. Seeing as you still have yet to apply to any hero schools, I have my offer. You can take it or leave it. Nezu smiled. He looked at the notebook, then back to Nezu. I would like to hear the offer first, sir. Nezu beamed. Good choice. Now, I would like to personally offer you my recommendation into UA, as my personal student. Izuku was very stunned, to say the least. Personal student? Did I hear that right? Yes, you did. Nezu smiled from his spot at the booth. Right then and there, if Izuku had been swallowed by the earth, he'd probably believe that too. Are you sure? Izuku asked, because seriously, what the hell is his life at this point? Nezu nodded, and handed him back the notebook. I think you express incredible potential that can be molded and shaped into something more. Deadly, he grinned. Izuku was going to pass out. Sir, I'm quirkless, he muttered out. That seemed to take the principal off guard, but he had a quick recovery. All the more reason. That just goes to show your incredible talent. Holy. If this is a dream, I hope I never wake up. I would happily die right here. Sir, I would like to take your offer. Izuku decided. Nezu looked like a kid on Christmas, gleefully clapping his hands together. Lovely. Now, I was able to obtain Hawk's number so we could further discuss any future arrangements, but I assume you would like to hand him the news yourself. Izuku nodded. Yes, that'd be nice. Good. Now, do you have a ride home? Nezu asked. Izuku shook his head. No, but I only needed a ride here because of the... I'm fine just walking, sir. Nezu thought about that for a minute. Alright, just be sure to tell someone you actually made it back to your apartment. You have my number if you need anything. He said as a waitress came around with a check. I've got the check, you get home. Nezu waved Izuku off. Just like that, Izuku had left the coffee shop, and possibly cemented the next 6 years of his life. Kigo had very high hopes that the meeting with Nezu would go well, if it even is Nezu. He was in the middle of his patrol when his phone pinged. Kigo landed and quickly took out his phone. Unknown, this is Nezu, just came to say that my chat with Mr. Midoriya went quite well. I expect him to share the news with you later. That's good. How'd you get my number, chicken? Unknown, a magician never reveals his secrets. That set Kigo on edge. Yes, the principal of UA is very smart, but something illegal had to have been done to get his private number. I have 12 contacts in my phone. Well, if that isn't just depressing. Kigo flew off again to continue his patrol. The day had actually been relatively busy. A robbery occurred on a street a few blocks away. Kigo stopped a purse snatcher, got caught up by paparazzi, quickly escaped, and stopped a mugging. God, what I'd give to have one patrol, where nothing happens. Like a vacation for a pro hero. Kigo smiled at the pleasant thought. Suddenly, there was a crash from a small record shop. Kigo immediately went down to investigate. Upon his landing, a familiar cat ran out to greet him. What the hell? His thoughts were cut off as another familiar face appeared. Little Sheriff. You again, groaned Darby. Kigo resisted the urge to start laughing. Wow, you really are a terrible vigilante, he smirked. Darby frowned. It is not my fault the BSD thinks you're an actual chicken. I'm flattered, but slightly offended. Kigo grinned, picking up the calico he had previously saved the oh-so-elusive vigilante. You know, if you don't want to get arrested, stop running into heroes. Kigo suggested. Yes, because I am clearly doing this on purpose. You are the only pro I have run into since I began doing this. Darby growled at the hero. Maybe it's fate. Kigo laughed. Darby ignored him and held out his arms, a gesture asking for his cat back. You know, I'm beginning to wonder if the poor girl is even safe with you, he said, withholding the cat from Darby. Brat is fine here. Besides, how do you even know if it's a girl? Darby protested. Kigo snickered. Dumbass, calicos are predominantly female. There's like 1% of them that actually end up male. The cat twisted and purred in Kigo's grasp, but not seeming to wiggle away. Darby just sighed in defeat. If I let you into the store, will you never speak to me again? Kigo took that as a total win and let himself inside the rather well-built record shop. Wow, is this your house? He asked, turning to face the vigilante. F off, so what if it is? Darby replied, no malice in his voice. It's nice, real homey in here, why no? Kigo observed his surroundings. So, Darby, will I ever get a real name or just your fake but stage name? Do I get your real name or just your fake but stage name? Darby glared. Kigo wanted to see where this was going. He sat down on an old couch in what appeared to be a lounge. He couldn't really tell. Well, you can call me Takomi. If you want. Kigo offered. Wow, you gave in surprisingly quickly. Darby blurted out. I can't give you my last name, or my first. Ties me back to a lot of childhood shit I don't feel like dealing with. Ever. Kigo nodded. He had learned a lot about shitty childhoods in the last few weeks, so he could vaguely understand. Well, that's okay. I'm taking your cat though, clearly she loves me more and therefore I get custody. Kigo said, standing up with the cat. Darby nearly blew a fuse right then and there. Hell no. That's my cat that I found in the dumpster, not you. Kigo snorted and held up the calico. Oh, are you a dumpster kitty? The cat meowed happily. Darby let out a long sigh. Please, give me strength to not set this city ablaze, he'd mumbled. I would have to arrest you for arson if you did that, Darby. Kigo said. What about every other illegal thing I've done? Darby deadpanned. Can't arrest you if I never saw it happen. Hawks brushed off. My name is widely known at the police department. I have done plenty of illegal things. Darby snapped. They don't have your face, they don't have your actual name, they also do not even know where you originate from. Where you live, nothing. They have a quirk and a stage name. That's it. Kigo reasoned. Darby groaned and rubbed his eyes. Don't you have a patrol to be on? Seriously, you are slacking. Kigo shrugged. It's been a 5-minute talk, Darby. However, I would like to continue this chat outside of my patrol route. I don't know what you're asking of me. Darby looked confused. Your number, so if you get yourself in deep shit you can get a helping hand. Kigo offered. That is the dumbest shit I have ever heard spew out of the mouth of hero, and I've heard a lot of dumb shit. Darby growled. Fine, I won't extend my helping hand to you. If I find you bleeding out, I'm leaving you to die. Kigo pouted. That sounds an awful lot like blackmail, Takomi. Darby grumbled. Kigo took out a pen and grabbed Darby's hand, and wrote his number down. Seriously though, if you get in anything way over your head, you have my number. Kigo smiled before leaving the small record shop, leaving a vigilante with a hero's phone number. Kigo flew off and continued his patrol route. Lord help him, he still had the other half of the day to continue it. Kigo sighed helplessly, but his phone pinged. Bush, I am safe and at the apartment. Ah, the meeting went well, I assume. I'll be home. Eventually, we still got to stop by your mother's place at some point to get your stuff, chicken. Bush, forgot about that. You've been living in 2 pairs of clothes and one of my t-shirts for the past 2 weeks, how'd you forget, chicken? Bush, I dunno, H20 really bothered about thinking BT her TBH. Kigo sighed, pocketed his phone and continued on his patrol. Today has been such a long day. He internally groaned, and pursued on. I am getting chicken for dinner. He had decided that after seeing a restaurant, which was incredibly busy for 1 in the afternoon. Kigo hadn't had much luck on his patrol the rest of the day, so he finished, got the chicken wings, and headed to the apartment. He had expected a rather distraught Izuku to greet him, but was pleasantly surprised by the excited aura surrounding the boy. Well, someone had a good day. Kigo noted. Izuku nodded. So imitwithnidzu today and dreed thruff my notebooks and told me they were really good thinovid mere recommendations petetue. Kigo did not catch a single word of whatever Izuku had just said. You know that I can't understand you when you talk faster than I fly, he patted Izuku's head. Izuku stopped muttering and looked up. Alright. Well, I met with Ennedzu today. He read through my notebooks and said that they were very good. He also might have offered me a... Izuku made the last part inaudible. What was that last part? I got offered a recommendation spot at UA, as his personal student. Kigo felt very light-headed in that moment. He offered you a recommendation spot, as his personal student, he repeated slowly. Why yes. Izuku confirmed. You said yes? Kigo pressed his hands up to his face, breathing slowly. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So, yes, I did say yes. Izuku confirmed. Kigo felt shivers run down his back. Lord help us all, he murmured. Izuku watched as Kigo slowly removed his hands from his face, sighed, then wrapped Izuku in a hug. I am so happy for you, he declared proudly. Even if everyone here and in the next universe suffers for it, he added after a moment. Izuku frowned. I don't think that Nedzu will be that bad, he recalled when Nedzu said something about shaping him. Izuku's eyes widened. I'm going to die, aren't I? Izuku let out a sigh of relief as Kigo released him from the hug. I got chicken wings, he claimed, holding up a bag. That is the second time this week. Izuku looked at him. I don't complain when you want to eat katsudon, now do I? Kigo gently shoved him. Izuku rolled his eyes and Kigo's widened as he seemed to recall something. I ran into Darby again today, he started off cautiously. Izuku really wanted to understand Kigo's thought process because, what the hell Kigo, he's an illegal vigilante that you have now had 2 chances to capture. This was one of the few times Izuku did not mumble his words aloud, which he was grateful for. Kigo, are you trying to get yourself arrested? He glared at Kigo. No, just. I technically haven't seen him do anything illegal, so. I can't really arrest him, can I? Kigo protested weakly. Why you dumbass? Kigo's phone pinged. Izuku ran over to it before Kigo could reach it. Unknown. Hey, this is Darby, thought I'd put my contact information here. Just in case. Izuku really wanted to be furious right now, but he wasn't. Kigo, you gave the vigilante your phone number, he shouted, with little heat behind the words. That did not stop Kigo from flinching back at that. Maybe I did, but it seems like a good idea. For future reference, he reasoned. Izuku looked incredulously at Kigo. What future reference? This is just tying you to assisting a vigilante, which is illegal. Okay, but he could be useful. Kigo held up his hands. Kigo, why you are very smart, but you are the biggest dumbass I have ever known. What part of being in contact with a vigilante could be useful? Izuku snapped. Kigo's eyes widened. Heroes are very limited to what they can and can't do, especially when they are in the top 10, like me. He could be an informant of sorts. Izuku blinked. Well, that could be beneficial in the long run. It was a horrible idea, but maybe, just maybe, it could work in their favor. Izuku sighed and looked at Kigo. He handed the phone back. You better not screw this up, Kigo. Izuku groaned. Why does it feel like I'm the adult here? Kigo grinned like a schoolgirl. I promise you, this will be a beneficial relationship. Izuku sighed and nodded. Tomorrow had arrived slowly, but that may have been the irritation Izuku felt. Kigo had a shorter patrol that day, and when he got back, he grabbed Izuku and headed to his mother's house. I really don't want to go back there. I still have my dad's notebook there. It was a valuable of Izuku's that had been given by his father before he'd gone MA. He hadn't told anyone about it, so maybe that's why it had never been on his mind. The notebook was shoved under a floorboard under his bed, where his mother would hopefully never look. Kigo had been driving him there, a worried look on his face. "You know, your stuff may not even be there when we show up," he commented suddenly. Izuku did know this, but he knew he needed that notebook. "I am aware, but I need something I hid under the floorboards." Kigo spared him a glance before refocusing on the road. The rest of the drive was very quiet. Upon arriving at the small house, there were no lights on. "You even think she's home?" Kigo asked him. "Doesn't matter, I'm going in T through my window. I'll get what I need and get out. It's on the first floor, and I can shove most of my clothes in my knapsack," he said, fidgeting the knapsack he'd previously emptied. Kigo nodded and looked at the house. "So, she's not home?" "No, her shift ends at N9 and it's only 2 right now." Izuku looked at his phone. "Okay, hurry up, I can wait in the car," he said, turning off the car. Izuku closed the car door and ran around to his window. He was very shocked to see his room untouched for 3 weeks. Wow. That's impressive. Izuku slid open the window with ease. He'd snuck out many times before, Inko never cared. Upon entering the room, he immediately headed for the dresser, grabbing as many clothes as possible, shoving them into the rather large knapsack. After stuffing the bag full, he looked under the bed. The floorboard had not been moved. Izuku sighed in relief. "That's good." He shifted the board and stuck his hand into the space. He eventually stumbled across the notebook. Izuku eagerly pulled it out. He inspected it quickly, then carefully opened it. Inside the first page was a picture of a man with curly black hair and candy red eyes. He was tall and lengthy with freckles splashed across his face. Izuku smiled and closed the notebook, leaving the house and shutting the window carefully. He entered the car quickly and looked at Kigo, holding up the notebook. "Is that one of yours?" Kigo raised a brow. Izuku shook his head. "My father's. It was one of the only things he'd left before. Going him." Kigo suddenly recalled the interrogation on Midoriya Inko. "Didn't your mother say that he ditched her?" he questioned. "Oh, that's what Inko thinks. He just kinda disappeared one day. I got the N notebook but Inko didn't get anything but a small note." Izuku laughed a little. Kigo took in that information, so maybe his dad didn't run off. "There's still too much I don't know." Kigo frowned and they headed to Aldera. "Shit. Forgot to tell Izuku we would be here today." Izuku understandably did not react well. Kigo pulled the car over in the parking lot and turned to Izuku. "Hey, kid, relax. We're only here to test you out of school. If anyone tries to give you shit, I'll kick their butts, got it?" he said, running a hand through Izuku's hair. Izuku nodded and collected himself. "Oh, okay. I don't have to talk to anyone," Izuku said more or less to himself. Kigo smiled and stepped out of the car. He assumed classes were still in session. It was only 2:30, schools were still in for another half hour or so. Kigo led Izuku into the school and, as luck would have it, the principal's office was right at the front. Kigo smirked and headed in. Needless to say, the receptionist was bewildered to see a pro-hero standing in the office. She looked up at him. Can I help you, sir?" She put on a pretty smile. Kigo was not having it. "I would like to speak to the principal, if that's okay with you," he said as politely as he could. The woman nodded and dialed the phone to her side. There's a pro-hero here to speak with you," she cautiously said into the phone. The woman on the other end of the line was very loud. "All right. Send him in," she had said in a cocky and rather arrogant manner. Receptionist lady simply nodded, hung up the phone and pointed to the door. "You can head in now," she murmured. Kigo nodded and headed into the room, Izuku following behind him. Receptionist lady's eyes blew wide open when she saw Izuku, and Kigo could tell whether that was a good or bad thing. When the two took a seat, the principal looked very irritated upon seeing Izuku. Kigo wanted to punch her. Nevertheless, the woman held out her hand and smiled. "Nice to meet you, Hiro-san. I'm Takashi Ichika." Kigo took her hand and shook it. "Just Hawks is fine," he glowered. The woman was slightly tense but looked back and forth between the two. "So, what has young Midoriya gotten himself into lately?" she asked carefully. Kigo did not miss how the woman had almost called Izuku Deku. Kigo was not dumb, he knew very well Izuku could also be read as useless. Hell, it was one of the first things he'd noticed when reading the notebooks. However, he did not expect the goddamn principal to be calling Izuku that. "Well, you see, Miss Takashi, I'm here to talk about having Izuku test out of school." That caught the woman off guard, especially the first name basis. Are you sure, Hawk-san? I understand he has good grades and all, but that dash. Kigo held up a hand. "I know very well what Izuku is capable of, and I know for a fact that he is more than capable to test out of middle school." The woman gulped and nodded. "Well, we're going to need his mother's senior dash." "Don't bother with that." Kigo nearly growled. Excuse me?" In case you didn't know, Inko Midoriya has lost custody of her son. Therefore he is under my guardianship, and my signature will suffice. He glared daggers at the woman. Takashi nodded and grabbed a stack of papers. If you don't mind me asking, was Deku's home life really so bad you had to pull him from his mother? And, hoo boy, if Kigo wasn't on camera he would throw this lady out the mother effing window. I think we both know that the name you've given him along with your security cameras are enough to keep you from asking any more questions, Takashi. Kigo growled at the woman. Apparently, that was the moment the principal caught her slip up and immediately flinched back. "We can get that test arranged very soon, Hawk-san," she smiled weakly. It was 20 minutes later. Izuku had completed the test with little to no effort, and turned it in. Takashi took it and gulped, turning the Kigo. "You should be able to remove him from the school if he's passed the test by next week." She held out a hand to shake. Kigo hesitantly took it, and looked at Izuku. "All right, we're heading out now. Have a good day, Miss Takashi." Kigo growled on his way out. The principal stood there, frightened, no doubt. Kigo and Izuku reached the front of the school building and headed towards the car. The bell to release the students rang, and Izuku panicked. He immediately booked it for the car and slammed the door. What if someone saw me? What if Bakugo saw me? No, you got into the car fast enough. No one saw you. Kigo, however, was laughing when he got into the car. "I didn't know you could run so fast," he chuckled, putting the car in reverse. The week had passed. Izuku had been chatting with Shizunu over the phone most days, talking about how shit school was for the both of them. There was also the hell that Kigo put Izuku through with the godforsaken training. Izuku was resting on the couch after a hard day. That was when Kigo appeared in the living room with a stack of mail. "I have that letter from Aldera," he grinned. Izuku smirked and took it when Kigo handed it to him. "Open it, so we can get this over with." Kigo complained. Izuku punched Kigo's arm and proceeded to tear open the note. Izuku Midoriya has passed W with flying colors of nearly 100% in all departments. Y yada, 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 D deemed the courses unfit. More F filler words. We believe that Midoriya Izuku is able to safely be removed from school with a college-level score on his A assessment. Izuku hummed happily as he finished reading the note. Kigo grinned and hugged Izuku tightly. "I told you so. We're eating katsudon tonight," he proudly proclaimed. Izuku could only smile happily as the note swayed helplessly in his hand. "Maybe, this is exactly what I've been waiting for." If you had told Izuku a month ago he would have a pro-hero as an older brother, be removed from his hell of a school, and placed on recommendations for UA, he would have taken you to a doctor. Now, he had everything he could ever want, and life was great. 2 years have passed. Izuku was 14 now, just under a year away from going to high school. "I can't wait to get back to school," he thought, because 2 years of no school was incredibly boring. Izuku mulled over everything that had happened since he'd met his brother. He got away from his mother, got away from Bakugo, got away from his old school, and moved on. Izuku and Kigo had developed a routine over the 2 years. Kigo would patrol, Izuku would either train or work. Izuku also kept in touch with Nezu, they'd play chess together. Time to time. Sometimes he'd even get to go to Kigo's agency. He never got to really interact with the interns and sidekicks there, but they were nice to him. Now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever introduced myself to any of them. Oh well. Kigo had also been hanging out with Darby a lot. I still have yet to meet Darby. The same thing happened with Shinsu, but Izuku actually had the courtesy to introduce Shinsu to Kigo. He had yet to meet Shinsu's parents, apparently they are teachers and are hardly home. It was strange, but Izuku didn't really budge on it. He did, however, offer a place to stay if Shinsu needed it. You can never be too sure. Izuku was now sitting at the desk in the guest room turned his room. It was a rather slow day, and Izuku was bored. He got up and stretched his limbs. Maybe I should go for a walk. He looked at the time, 11:45 a.m. I have enough time to go to that cafe over in Musutafu. Izuku grabbed his knapsack and headed for the door. Izuku opened his chat messages and clicked on the top contact. Going to that one cafe in Musafatu, be back by 4 bush. Chicken, K, PLS stay safe. Izuku smiled and pocketed his phone. He headed for the nearest train station to hopefully catch the 12 o'clock train. There were news reports of All Might heading back to Japan for the time being. It was exciting for everyone. Izuku saw a lot of people roaming the streets, perhaps on the lookout for the number 1 hero. Izuku quickly hopped on the train, scanning his card, and found a seat in the back. He arrived at the cafe and sat down. I could complete some more work while I'm here. Soon time flew by and Izuku looked at his phone. It was 3, he sighed and left, having previously paid a while ago. He walked down the sidewalk, coming up on a bridge. Izuku was startled to a stop when the sewage lid began to rattle. He stepped back. Suddenly, the sewage lid shot off and a green sludge emerged. Izuku quickly turned to run but was quickly blocked off by more sludge. He spun around. "Get the hell away from me," he shouted at the moving sludge. That proved quickly ineffective, as a face moved up in the sludge. "Sit still, kid, gotta hijack your body. Should only be 45 seconds. The sludge grinned. Izuku was suddenly wrapped in sludge as he kicked and screamed. It was useless against a liquid. He flailed his arms trying to reach the villain's eyes, but to no avail. "Fear not, for I am here," a very loud voice rang out. Suddenly, Izuku's head hit ground and his world went black. Only for a few seconds though, as he quickly regained consciousness, only to see All Might towering above him. Izuku rightfully screeched and reared back. All Might flinched back too. "I am glad you're okay, young man," All Might loudly proclaimed. Izuku nodded and picked up his backpack. "Hey, All Might, before you go. I have a question," he began slowly as All Might's attention focused on him. "All right, make it quick. I have places to be," he said in a friendly tone, a bit rude nonetheless. "Can a quirkless person be a hero?" Izuku held his breath. All Might looked at him with pity. He couldn't tell. "Young man, being a hero is very dangerous. People get hurt every day. So, no. I do not think it is wise to become a hero." All Might sighed. Izuku felt a bit empty to say the least, because wow, that hurt. He didn't flinch, didn't cry, just simply nodded. All Might smiled slightly, then jumped away from the bridge. Izuku fell to the ground and let out a choked breath. His throat hurt, everything hurt. He wanted to go back home and talk to his brother. The train station was still a ways off, and Izuku realized he should hurry up. He quickly got up, shoving his emotions into the back of his head. He'd deal with them later. Upon walking down the street, he saw the same sludge that had previously been choking him. That beach just doesn't give up? Izuku thought it was dumb, seeing as the sludge was attacking people where everyone could see who he was hijacking. He quickly sped up to investigate. The crowd was thick, and Izuku quickly maneuvered through it. His eyes widened as he saw the victim of the sludge, Bakugu. While Bakugu had tortured Izuku for his entire life, Izuku couldn't let him die. He internally groaned and jumped into the scene while heroes stood by. Izuku launched his knapsack into the sludge villain's face. "Shit, I have my computer in there," he realized upon release. The knapsack flew and landed in the villain's eyes, giving Izuku enough time to pull Bakugu out of the sludge. It wasn't long before All Might came crashing in again, sending sludge flying everywhere. Where the hell were you? You can jump across literal cities." Izuku glared at the top pro. Chaos was everywhere. Cameras were pointed at Izuku and Bakugu. The heroes looked ready to scold Izuku. So, he quickly snatched his knapsack and ran. He ran and made a turn down an alley, down a road, down another alley, and finally deemed it safe. Thank God for Kigo's endurance training, he thought as he opened his knapsack. Other than the computer being dented and a little damp, Izuku should be able to transfer everything off of it. He should probably get a new one any rate. His eyes drifted up to the very unfamiliar environment. Izuku groaned and buried his head in his hands. Darby did not think he'd find himself in Musafatu today, but he decided to go. He was walking down the sidewalk when a teen flew out of an alleyway and proceeded to DMN near collapse. Darby quickly rushed over to the kid and kneeled down. "Hey, kid, you good?" No response. Darby put a hand on a shoulder to shake the kid, but his hand was promptly stopped. "Please don't," came a hoarse reply. "DMN kid, you look like shit." Darby noted the kid's screwed-up hair, hoarse voice, and deeply expressed tiredness. The greenit shook his head and laughed. Upon looking up at the vigilante, the kid's eyes widened. Is he scared of me? Holy shit, it's nice to meet you, Darby." Darby flinched, because as far as he was aware the police, nor public, had his face. "How the hell do you know who I am, kid? Or, he hasn't mentioned me in all your sea chats." The kid grinned at him. Darby thought over everyone he'd talked to in the past few months. He did not recall any of them having siblings. The kid sighed. "Well, it makes sense. Kigo doesn't like to speak about his personal life." The scarred man looked at him, very confused. "I don't even know anyone named Kigo." The kid laughed loudly and hoarsely this time. "Wow, he didn't even give you his full name." "Kid, I'm a vigilante. People don't really give me their names, P.A.D." Darby glared. "Not even Hawks," the kid wheezed. "Hawks? Takomi? He never mentioned having a brother. They don't even look the same? That's a bold accusation right there, kid." Darby growled at the teen. "Hey, I know who you are, plus you could just text him. Tell him you have his plant and he'll know what you're talking about," the kid suggested. "Alright, I need a name." "Midoriya Izuku, Mr. Darby, sir." Midoriya politely introduced himself. Darby pulled out his phone and opened up Takomi's contact. "Darby, I have your shrub, he said you'd understand what that meant?" You have Izuku? Where is he? Tell him his but is grounded when he shows up. Chicken. Well, Darby was surprised. The kid was actually Bird Boy's brother. "Here. Alrighty kid, I'll take you back to my shop and Takomi can pick you up," he said, extending his hand. Midoriya quickly took it and stood up. "Thanks, Darby," he grinned as he began to follow the vigilante. Kigo was freaking out. His shift ended at 5, Izuku had been on the news, and he was now with Darby. That was not the introduction I imagined for the two. He groaned into his hands and his phone chimed. "Darby, your brother is scaring me. He keeps asking about my quirk." Kigo laughed. Thank God they weren't dead. He typed his reply. "This is normal, good luck, chicken." "Darby, that is so ominous, WTF." Kigo chuckled and quickly pocketed his phone, glancing over the pile of paperwork he had to do. It wasn't as fun as patrolling, scratch that, it was hell. Kigo sighed loudly and picked up the stack, pulling it over to himself. Izuku was having the time of his life right now. He'd finally met the oh-so-mysterious Darby, and was not disappointed. Darby seemed like a morally sound human, with actual decency. Sue him, Izuku didn't have very high standards. Izuku had been asking Darby questions about his quirk when the news channel switched subjects. Just minutes ago, a middle schooler was saved by a mystery hero. The name and quirk are still unknown, however, we do have this video clip. The TV switched to a video of him throwing his knapsack at the villain and booking it. Along with an angry Bakugo shouting an inaudible, but decipherable to Izuku, Deku. Izuku looked at Darby, who was now looking him up and down, eyes widening. "You saved that kid, didn't you?" he asked slowly. "Why, I used to know him. Before he got his quirk." Izuku nodded. Darby seemed content with that answer and didn't ask any more questions on the subject. "You know, I can tell you about the quirks of the villains I've taken down," he said, observing Izuku's notebook labeled Hero Analysis. Izuku immediately snapped his head up, attention zeroed in on Darby. He didn't even blink before Izuku had his pen and soggy notebook in hand. Before the two knew it, Kigo burst through the doors of the record shop. "Izu, you are grounded," was the first thing out of his mouth. Darby had to suppress a laugh as Izuku opened his mouth like a fish. "You know, now that I think about it, you kinda committed vigilantism," Darby mentioned, causing Kigo to further freak out. Izuku rolled his eyes. "It's not vigilantism if I don't have a Q quirk to commit it with." "What?" Darby blinked. "Yeah, by legal terms, vigilantism is using one's quirk without a license for personal or non-personal benefits, so by that, IT technically committed no crimes today." Izuku smirked. Kigo looked about ready to pass out. "You have been spending too much time chatting with Nedzu," he groaned into his hands. "Sit down then, you oversized chicken." Izuku huffed. Kigo did just that, finding a seat on one of the 3 couches in the lounge of the record shop. Okay. You decided that it would be a good idea to save Bakugo from the sludge, and not let the pros handle it. Being stuck in S-sludge is absolute agony, no one else should have to suffer that too, Kigo. Izuku snapped back. "What? No one else?" Kigo screeched. "It's fine. I told you, no one else. I encountered the villain prior to that, and it was horrible." Izuku retorted. "No wonder your voice is so hoarse," Darby pondered. "Oh my god. Izuku, how the F aren't you dead?" Kigo attempted to relax. Yeah. All Might saved me. Told me I couldn't be a hero without a quirk, then left." Izuku stated as if it was simple math. "He said what?" Kigo growled. Darby honestly felt as if he was invading something private. The two brothers didn't seem to mind though. That was until Midoriya spoke about what All Might said. Darby was cessed off. He knew that Hero Society was fed up, but that was a bit cruel. Takomi seemed to agree, radiating a very threatening aurora. Midoriya had shrunken back into his chair, and was now looking at the ground. "Izuku, no hero in their right mind should ever say shit like that to a civilian." Takomi had pressed his hand to his head. "On the bright side, you should get into a hero school just to spite him." Darby offered. Midoriya nodded and grinned. "I'm a recommendation student to UA." Darby would have spit out his water if he'd been drinking any. "What the hell, how?" "Izuku works analysis for my agency, Nedzu saw potential, the world will burn. Nothing special." Takomi gestured to Midoriya. "Alrighty," Darby slowly nodded, letting that sink in. A comfortable silence followed with that. Izuku continued to write in his notebook, Kigo mulled over the day, and Darby went to get some soda. "Darby, how about you just come over to the apartment?" Izuku asked suddenly, causing Kigo to shoot up. Darby looked at the teen, then back to the teen's brother. "What about Takomi? I highly doubt he would support this." "Well, he's been non-stop talking about you for 2 years, and I want to know you a little better. It's a win-win." Midoriya grinned. Takomi let out a long, exasperated sigh. "You are going to be the death of me, Izuku," he groaned. Midoriya smiled and shot up from his seat. "Alrighty then. I'll see you at home." He grabbed his knapsack. "No. You are walking with us, especially after all the shit you've pulled today." Takomi's eyes narrowed. Darby got up, completely forgetting about the sodas. He grabbed his phone and proceeded to follow Takomi and Midoriya out the door. Izuku was leading the way back to the house. They decided to walk along the area of Dagobah Beach. It was a quiet area that people avoided due to the insane amounts of trash. Izuku looked at the beach. "I have 10 months until the recommendation exams. I could definitely do it." Izuku spun around and grinned madly. Kigo lifted an eyebrow and Darby looked confused. "I am going to clean Dagobah over the next 10 months, in order to be prepared for UA," he stated simply. Darby looked like he wanted to do a spit take, but Kigo returned his grin. "I bet 5,000 yen you won't get through all the trash." "I will," Izuku loudly proclaimed. "What are you going to do with all of it?" Darby asked. Izuku thought for a second. There is a junkyard not too far from here. I could probably get Kigo to go get a truck for me." It'd be a B benefit for them because they're getting materials and I'm winning a bet. Izuku grinned. Yes, but this is mostly trash. What are you going to do with all of that? Darby looked at Izuku. Dump? I'll send it to a dump, using the truck from the junkyard. Kigo, how much does it cost to borrow a truck? Izuku looked at his brother. I don't know, money. Kigo offered. The trio arrived back at the house a while after their stroll. It had taken a train ride just to get back to the apartment. In all consideration, it was relatively quick. Izuku quickly ran to his room and dropped off his knapsack. Kigo had found that over the past 2 years he'd become much better at cooking. I guess not living off of microwavable food will do that to you. He quickly grabbed some rice and spotted the leftover curry that had been made. Kigo dropped the rice into the cooker and began to heat up the curry. Izuku had returned from his room and joined Darby in the living room. Okay, seriously, tell me about your quirk. Izuku whined. Darby simply rolled his eyes. Now, why would I give away my primary form of defense? That is not true, you actually only use your quirk as a last resort option. I've analyzed your fights and T takedowns and you hardly use your quirk. So it's not a primary source of defense. Izuku stated. Well, aren't you just so smart? Darby deadpanned. Yes, I already have several ideas on what your quirk is and could be done to make it more efficient, fixing the weaknesses in it. Does your quirk burn you when you use it? Sorry, that was rude. Izuku snapped his mouth shut. Kigo had also wondered that Darby had severe scarring along his face and arms. It was worrying, but he just hoped that his quirk wasn't the case. Can I look through your notes? If you have so much information, I'll just confirm or deny it being true. Darby suggested. Kigo watched as Izuku handed Darby the notebook. Darby's eyes blew open as he read through it. Kigo chuckled and the rice maker chimed. Kigo turned around to serve the food. Izuku was carefully listening to Darby as he confirmed most of his theories on Darby's quirk. No, I cannot fly with my quirk. Darby sighed. Have you tried to, though? I mean, if you exert equal amounts of fire on each side of you, then you could possibly lift yourself into the air. Kinda like that Flame superhero from those pre-quirk era comics. Izuku went on. Well, those are comics. I don't really want to go near pulling those stunts with my quirk. As you guessed earlier, my quirk does burn me. That's how I got these scars, and I don't feel like testing out shit like that anytime soon. Darby glared. Izuku frowned. Alright, I'm sorry for pressing you. You were just curious, don't worry about it. Darby ruffled his hair. Get over here before your food gets cold. Kigo called from the kitchen. Okay, Mom. Izuku laughed as he headed into the kitchen. Izuku was watching the news when a case came up. It was about Darby. We are happy to inform viewers that the vigilante known as Darby has finally been given an appearance. Earlier today, a man was arrested, unable to provide a description to our sketch department. The woman smiled. An image was brought up to the screen, displaying a man with black hair, but no scars. Yes, it did look like Darby, but how the hell did the man miss all his scars? It's possible that he's associating Darby's face with one that may look familiar. Now that Izuku looked at it, Darby didn't really look like Darby, it was just the slightest changes in facial features that did it. He'd ask Kigo later. Usajiyama was supposed to be stopping by later today. She'd been hanging around a lot more recently. He liked to think they were friends. A knock on the door rang out. Oh, maybe she's early? Izuku went over to the door to find Shinsu standing there. Hey, Midoriya. I can't really go home right now, he mumbled. Did your parents kick you out? Izuku immediately asked. No, I just don't really want to talk to them right now. Shinsu looked away. I did something bad happen? Izuku questioned him. Not with them, no, but Shinsu lifted his leg to only see it was bleeding badly. Shinsu! Get inside, oh my god. Izuku panicked and rushed him inside. Shinsu didn't argue, and limped inside where Izuku sat him down. On the couch. Now, tell me what the hell happened after I return. Izuku headed to the bathroom to grab the first aid kit and some towels. When he returned, Shinsu had apparently used paper towels to clean up the wound. Are those bite marks? Izuku asked upon inspection. Shinsu flinched and nodded. Can't keep anything from you, can I? No, I'm too smart. Also, those are very clearly bite marks. Did you fight a wolf? Izuku brought out the alcohol to clean the wound. Lift your leg up, you need to elevate it. Shinsu followed his instructions and placed his leg on the table. Izuku put down the towel on the floor and began to clean up the blood on Shinsu's leg. Now, care to explain how this happened? Izuku looked up at him. It was just some stupid dare. From school. Shinsu fiddled his hands. That's bullshit, even you're not that stupid. To do whatever happened. Izuku growled at him. I would rather not talk about it. Shinsu snapped back. You getting bitten by a effing dog because of a dare is a bullshit lie and you know it. Izuku yelled. Shinsu flinched back and looked at Izuku. If I tell you, you can't tell anyone else. That depends on how bad the situation is. Izuku replied coolly. I've been getting bullied for having a villainous quirk. Shinsu began. It wasn't very bad until recently when they started being physical about it. Today some kid with a wolf quirk bit me. Izuku was having none of that, his gaze hardened as he began wrapping up the bite. So you're telling me that kids have been bullying you enough to where this will probably scar it so deep? Hell, you should probably get this looked at in a hospital. Not some home first aid. Shinsu looked away and flinched when Izuku flicked his leg. You have to tell someone about this, Shinsu, it will get better. How can you be so sure? I can't just go up and tell people that I'm getting bullied and haven't said anything. You don't even go to school, I don't understand how you could understand. Shinsu snapped. The same shit happened to me when I did go to school, you know what changed it? Telling people. So please, tell your parents, they can and will fix this. Izuku pleaded and looked up at Shinsu. Shinsu shook his head. I don't want them to hate me. When we met I had only been with them for 6 months. What if now they hate me? Izuku felt tears prick his eyes, goddamn eyes. Shinsu, before I met Kigo, I had run away. My own mother didn't care for me, and the person who was supposed to be my best friend abused me. I had known Kigo for 2 weeks, but he got me away from that. Now look at where I am, safe. Izuku had hot tears running down his face. Shinsu looked at him. Why are you crying? It just happens, can't do anything about it. However, I can cry on command. Izuku laughed. Shinsu laughed a little at that too. I can call my dad to pick me up, he said, pulling out his phone. Promise me you'll tell them. Izuku's eyes hardened. Okay, I promise. Shinsu confirmed. Hitoshi and Midoriya had begun to talk about lighter topics, such as quirks. Midoriya had gone into a deep dive mumble session about Eraserhead's quirk, which Hitoshi laughed at. He hadn't told Midoriya who his parents were, and felt like he was lying to Midoriya, but ignored it. Hitoshi picked up his phone and texted Dad number I'm at friend's house and, can you pick me up, cat? Loud? Friend's house? I'll drop you the location, cat. Hitoshi left his dad the address and looked over to Midoriya, who was looking worriedly at his leg. Midoriya, it's fine. Really, it wasn't your fault, he reassured the shorter teen. I should have known this would have happened. Midoriya cried. Hitoshi looked at him. Midoriya, you had no way of knowing this would have happened. You were right, I should have told someone. It's partially my fault for not doing anything about it sooner. Midoriya just shook his head. It's not your fault. A knock at the door cut Midoriya off. Suddenly the door flew open. Izuku, someone called out. You Sugiyama. Midoriya quickly responded. Ah, that's who that is. A woman with large bunny ears and a casual outfit came through the door. Hitoshi recognized her as number 5 hero Miruko. Needless to say, the hero quickly took note of the situation. Izuku, who's your friend? What happened? She pointed to his leg. This is Shinsu, I've told you about him before. Here, Midoriya trailed off. I got bitten by a dog. Hitoshi stated flatly. Miruko paused, then continued, straightforward, I like you. Now, what have you done to treat the bite? She looked at Midoriya. I washed it out with alcohol and wrapped it. I think it needs proper medical treatment though, Midoriya replied. Miruko nodded and sat on the couch. Can I take a look at it? She asked. Hitoshi nodded and allowed for the hero to unwrap his leg. He watched as Miruko visibly tensed upon inspecting the bite. This needs stitches. How the hell did you even walk over here? She looked Hitoshi in the eye. I hobbled. He looked away from her. I am shit at giving people sticks, and you should probably go to a hospital any rate. I can drive you, she offered. Ah, no. My dad is gonna pick me up in a minute. He can take me to the hospital. Hitoshi looked down. How'd you end up with a bite that bad anyway? Try killing any dogs lately, she observed. Ah, no, he avoided a direct answer. Miruko looked him up and down, then back over to Midoriya. I've got a case for you to do later. She looked back over to Hitoshi. I'm Usajiyama Rumi. She held out a hand. Shinsu Hitoshi, he returned her handshake. Hisashi was very concerned as to why his son was at someone's house, no prior telling of who or why he was even there. All he'd been given was a location, and Hitoshi asking to be picked up. So that's where he was now, standing in front of a door that was already left open. Not concerning at all. He stepped through the doorway to see number 5 hero Miruko, his son, and a green-haired teen all in the living room. It was a very odd sight. Hitoshi, care to explain? He asked. Hitoshi looked very guilty and the green-haired kid's eyes widened a lit, but he didn't speak. Miko was the first to speak up. Nice to see you again, President. Your son needs a hospital. Hisashi understandably freaked out, and noticed how Hitoshi's leg had a bite mark in it. Hitoshi, what the hell happened? Why didn't you call me or your father first? Hitoshi suddenly looked 10 times more guilty. I didn't want to tell you guys, he mumbled. Why not? We're your parents, Hitoshi, we care about you. Hisashi took note of the other 2 people in the room looking suddenly like they were invading a personal conversation. I'll give you the full story on our way to the hospital. Hitoshi responded. Hisashi sighed and looked over to the other 2 people. Hey there listener, I'm Yamada Hisashi. He held out a hand. The Green-Eat took his hand. Midoriya Izuku, sir. Hisashi smiled and turned to Hitoshi. Alright, I want the full story on our way to the hospital. His gaze hardened. Hitoshi nodded and rewrapped his leg. I guess this is the same Midoriya Hitoshi was hanging out with for a while. It was nice to meet the kid finally. Hitoshi wobbly stood up, and Midoriya helped him to the door. It was nice meeting you, Yamada, sir. Midoriya smiled. Hisashi nodded and helped Hitoshi out the door. It was nice to meet the kid, and Usajiyama was always nice to see, even with how straightforward she always was. Izuku sighed, thankful that Shinsu would be getting professional medical attention. What case did you want me on, Usajiyama? Usajiyama sighed. Izuku, I'm going to kick your butt if you keep calling me Usajiyami, please just call me Rumi. It's so much easier to say and hear. Izuku nodded. Case? Yeah, I actually have it right here. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. I can send you the payment once you're done. Izuku nodded and took the flash drive. He looked at his phone. Ah yeah, Kigo should be home soon. Izuku quickly ran up the stairs to grab his computer. He'd gotten a new one after the sludge incident. Usajirumi was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone. Are you staying for dinner? He asked, booting up his computer. Probably, Kigo's gotten much better at cooking since you came around, she laughed. Izuku snickered as well, because it was true. Izuku looked at the time again. When is he going to show up? As luck would have it, Kigo opened up the door. Hey Izuku, he greeted, then his gaze drifted over to Rumi. I'm going to be honest, I forgot about you, he stated. Rumi sighed, and rolled her eyes. Kigo grinned and fell onto the couch chair thing. Izuku never bothered to remember what they were actually called. So, how was your patrol? Izuku broke the sudden silence. Fine, same as usual, he quickly responded. Didn't they finally get a description of that vigilante? Darby, I think his name was? Rumi mentioned. Kigo's eyes widened a fraction, and Izuku looked over to him. Rumi apparently did not notice. They threw up a picture on the news. See, she handed Kigo her phone. Kigo saw the picture and began laughing. Rumi glared at him, and Izuku snickered a little too. What is so funny about it? She demanded. Kigo wheezed and tried to regain his breath. Holy shit, it's nothing. It's clearly nothing if it's got you cracking up this much, she growled, then her eyes widened. Kigo, you dumbass. You've seen him, haven't you? Izuku was still snickering as his brother immediately sobered. No way, that'd be illegal, knowing a vigilante and not doing anything about it. Kigo insisted. Rumi did not buy that, and was now glaring daggers at Kigo. She spun her head to Izuku. Did you know about this? Izuku stayed quiet and shook his head. Oh my god, I'm surrounded by absolute idiots. She held her face in her hands. Why didn't you bring him in when you had the chance? Kigo shrugged. Haven't really seen a reason to. Other than the fact that he's a vigilante and has committed arson. Rumi deadpanned. Yes, but Endeavor has burned entire buildings to the ground too. So the only issue here is that Darby doesn't have a license. Izuku piped in. Rumi looked very frustrated. I don't understand it, but I won't tell anyone. Kigo and Izuku relaxed. As long as you state your relationships with him and introduce me, she grinned. Kigo opened his mouth like a fish, and Izuku just looked at him. Well, technically we're friends. Darby found me after the sludge villain incident a few weeks ago. He's been hanging around the house since then. Izuku explained. Yep, I met Darby 2 years ago on patrol. We just stayed in contact, I guess. Kigo confirmed. Rumi let out an exasperated sigh. Okay, fine. You know a vigilante for 2 years straight, don't say anything about it, and he comes over to your house from time to time. Got it. Okay, how about I make some food before someone kills the other? Kigo said, standing up. Izuku nodded and Rumi just sat there, contemplating the new information. So, when do I get to meet your friend? Rumi asked. Kigo did a spit take and looked at Rumi. That was a part of the deal, she sang. Kigo internally groaned at that. Why did I ever befriend Rumi again? He wondered to himself. Looking over to Izuku, the traitor just smiled at him and shrugged. It's better than her almost dying to have to meet him. Izuku chuckled. You are still grounded for that. Kigo reminded him. Rumi looked between the two. I'm sorry, who almost died? That caused the two to pause and looked at each other. Remember the sludge villain? I had a run-in with him prior to saving the kid on live TV. Izuku explained. Rumi slapped Izuku over the head and glared at him. That was a dumbass decision, Izuku. I am aware. Izuku groaned. Kigo smirked. He learned his lesson the first time. Also, you should be heading to Dagobah if you want to win that bet. Izuku nodded and looked to Rumi. I'll get to work on that case later tonight. It was nice to see you, he said, heading out the door. The door clicked shut and Rumi turned to Kigo. When are you going to tell him you're dating a vigilante? She glared at him. What tea? Kigo shrieked, falling backwards. How did you come to that conclusion? I just assumed, but that confirmed it, she smirked. No. No, no, no. There is nothing like that happening between me and Darby. Kigo insisted. Rumi shrugged. If you say so. Izuku was suffering. Yes, he wanted to win that DMN bet, but he also really regretted pushing his body this far. Dagobah was covered head to toe in trash, and Izuku had to turn himself into a one-man army against an entire trash beach. He groaned as he loaded the truck Kigo had been able to rent. His goal was to load it fully once to twice a day, taking Sundays off. Izuku thought about it. Dagobah was a big beach. He could load a truck up once to twice a day. There are 30 to 31 days in a month. Except for February, which has 28 and sometimes 29. I have 10 months. If I do this roughly 260 times or more, surely the beach will be clean by then. It was a good estimate, and Izuku looked at the truck. It was a pig pickup with a trailer behind it. He did not know what to do with the vehicles that had literally been parked there for who knows how long. Izuku supposed he could find parts of them to sell. Yeah, it was worth a shot. Besides, he could learn a bit about mechanics along the way. What a good learning experience. he thought woefully. Izuku had returned home from Dagobah when his phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and picked up. "Hey Midoriya." Shinsu's voice came from across the line. "Shinsu, is your leg better?" he quickly asked. There was a pause on the line. "Yeah, I'm also not ever going back to that school. My dads were pretty cessed but not at me." Izuku did not miss the hints of relief that sounded from Shinsu's voice. "That's good, I'm happy you were able to fix the situation." "Yeah, thanks for convincing me to talk to my parents." "Anytime, Shinsu." With that the line died, and Izuku looked across his room to his computer. He should probably work on that case Rumi gave him. After Izuku's computer had broken from the sludge villain, he'd gotten a much better computer. With better security too. He plugged the sleek black flash drive into his computer. "Allow devices to access files?" He clicked yes. 4 files immediately showed up. Wow, these are depressingly lacking. His phone pinged and a text popped up. "Rumi, Izuku, I know you've just opened the files, but do not tell anyone outside of Kigo what's in them. Cryptid." Izuku stared at the text before looking back to the files. Everything that was there had nothing backing it up, only mere suspicion. What kind of case does Rumi have me working on? Suddenly pictures came up in the second file. It was a tall man in a suit and he had black curly hair. There were no obvious facial features to tell who the man was. Izuku opened another image showing a sketch of a man with no eyes, wrinkled face, and tubes running into his face. He looked so dead. Izuku had seen many quirks over his lifetime but none that would make you look so dead. Even quirks with fatal drawbacks didn't have effects like this. Izuku picked up his phone again. "Rumi, why did you send me a classified case file?" "Bush. Rumi, a few years ago there was a fight between the villain and All Might. We got some blood from the scene but I'll tell you in person tomorrow." Izuku wanted to ask questions, but decided it'd be better to ask Rumi in person tomorrow. Looking at the files he opened the third one. It talked about the villain. Name, All for One. Quirk, All for One. Description, as seen in file 2, the suspect is seen as having no eyes and distinctive facial features other than tubes. Would be easy to target in public. Believed to be under the disguise of a tall man with balk curly hair. Only known features of possible alter appearance. That was file 3. What's file 4? Izuku clicked on the file. Last year a fight between All for One and All might lead to an important lead on the case. The blood of All for One was found in an incredibly altered state. As found were multiple traces of different quirk genes and DNA. Specialists have found the supposed original DNA that is likely the identity of All for One. We found strands of DNA similar to those of Redacted and Redacted. Any more information is unknown at the time. Izuku released a breath he didn't know he was holding. If this villain is so serious, why would Rumi let me in on the case? He didn't know, but for now, it'd be better to sleep it off. From the moment Izuku had woken up that morning, Kigo suspected something was off. Izuku may have trouble remembering to sleep. He had this magical ability to never get bags under his eyes. Kigo was jealous for sure, but Izuku arriving in the kitchen with the deepest eye bags he'd ever seen on his brother was concerning. "Izuku, are you okay?" He looked at the teen. Izuku shook his head. "Rumi gave me a case last night. You know the villain All for One." Kigo felt his stomach drop. "Izuku, what kind of a case did Rumi give you?" I don't know. It was 4 files, each having different information on All for One. She said that she needed to talk to me about it today. I'm only allowed to talk about it to you, no one else is what she said. Izuku was shaking at this point and tears pricked his tired eyes. Kigo immediately wrapped his arms protectively around his little brother. "Izuku, it'll be okay. I'll personally kick Rumi's butt for ever asking you to look at that case," he growled. "We don't even know why she gave me the case yet." Izuku reminded. "Kigo. Doesn't mean I can't kick her butt though." Kigo promised. It was an hour later when Rumi came through the door, a rather guilty look on her face. Izuku was tired as F-, and Kigo didn't really want to put up with anything. "Rumi, why the hell did you give Izuku those files?" Kigo ruffled his wing feathers. Izuku looked up at Rumi from the couch. "Well. There was a recent development in the case. We needed him in order to progress any further forward in it. Rumi ignored a direct answer. What the hell? Rumi, you are the most straightforward person I know, why are you ignoring the question? Kigo snapped. Rumi looked at Kigo. Results came back from our specialists. They had finished splicing the blood we got from the all-for-one fight years ago. When they ran it through to see if there were any matches, Izuku was a near-direct match. She looked Kigo dead in the eye. Kigo wanted to laugh, he really did. There is no way Izuku is related to that monster. Is there? His eyes found Izuku shaking on the couch. Izuku, you good? Kigo carefully asked. Izuku didn't even register his voice. He simply stood up and walked to his room. Kigo wanted to follow him, but Izuku wasn't gone for long. Izuku wordlessly returned to the couch and produced a lovingly worn notebook. That's his dad's notebook. Izuku opened it and pulled out the photo of his father. Rumi tensed up and Kigo sat down next to Izuku. He watched as Rumi took the photo to inspect it. Upon a glance, there was nothing significant about it, just a man with a loving smile, freckles across his face, candy red eyes, and curly dark hair. Izuku, where the F did you get this? Rumi looked Izuku dead in the eye. That's my dad. Izuku had tears slowly falling from his eyes. Kigo quickly wrapped the boy up in a comforting hug, himself shaking slightly. Rumi just fell back into her seat, eyes blank. Sheet, Izuku. I'm sorry I brought you into this case, she apologized. It's fine. You didn't know. No one did. Izuku said, leaning into Kigo's side. Rumi nodded and Kigo didn't even know how to react. This is his notebook. You can copy the pages, but I don't want to hand over the original copy to anyone. Izuku said, placing his hand on the book. Rumi nodded. Can I take pictures of the pages? She asked Izuku. Izuku nodded, and shoved it towards Rumi. Kigo held Izuku tighter and Izuku finally broke down, sobbing into Kigo's shoulder. Rumi could only shake her head sadly as she began taking photos of the notebook. It's so strange not seeing Rumi heading headfirst into a situation like this. Maybe I call Darby later today, it might be a nice break for both of us. Darby had been working at his record shop with seemingly no hitches. Sure, the police had his face, but they had somehow missed the massive scarring on his face, which gave him free rein still. He was interrupted from his shift, if you could even call it that, by a call from Takomi. He quickly picked up. Hello. How would you feel about coming over later today? Takomi asked. Darby did not miss the obvious distress in Takomi's voice, but he'd ask later. Yeah, sure. Darby replied quickly. Takomi hung up first and Darby turned his attention to the empty record shop. Well, life could be worse. Izuku had been in a dazed state most of the day. He couldn't even think about what had happened. He just found out that his dad, the person that he'd looked up to, was a supervillain that had fought All Might and gotten away. Rumi had left not long after taking photos of the notebook, and nothing had been said. Kigo was in the kitchen, possibly stress cooking. Izuku had been given a blanket and stared blankly as news was playing on the TV. A knock was sounded on the door. Izuku would have gotten up and gotten the door if Kigo hadn't run over to get it first. It was really no surprise when Darby had appeared in the doorway. It was only a moment before Darby assessed the situation and pointed to Izuku. The kid okay? He asked Kigo. Kigo just shook his head. Look, I can't exactly tell you what happened, but he's not really in his best state of mind. A distraction might be good for both of us. Darby frowned and nodded. So Shrub, how have you been holding up? Izuku let out a strangled noise and shrugged his shoulders. That bad? Darby raised a brow. Izuku nodded and sat up. He quickly went over to the kitchen and poured himself a cup of water before promptly returning to his spot on the couch. Darby hadn't really been around the kid for long, but silence didn't fit the kid. Is there any version of the story I can get? He looked hopefully to Takomi and Midoriya. Takomi sighed. If Izuku wants to tell you anything he can. I don't know how much we can and can't say. Hell, there are only 12 heroes on the case, but we were never really sworn to secrecy. It's just a matter of your safety that is at stake, he explained. Midoriya looked up at Darby. I looked up to my dad a lot, more than I ever could to my mom. Turns out he's wanted for a sheet ton of horrible crimes. Midoriya mumbled. Darby had his fair share of unfavorable memories with his father. If it makes you feel any better, I had a shitty father too. Not in the same way of course, but I can get a little bit of an idea of what you're feeling. How'd you deal with it? Midoriya asked. Well kid, I really didn't. Why do you think I'm a vigilante now? I ran away. Darby looked away from Midoriya's questioning gaze. There was a calculating look in Midoriya's eyes, like Darby was being read like a book. He did not like it one bit. Shifting away from the kid a bit, he continued. The BSD would beat me daily, trying to make me a perfect successor. He spat out the last part. My skin is not made for a firework, so I burned myself. Eventually I couldn't take it, so here I am now. Darby explained. Midoriya nodded and let the information settle. So your dad has a fire quirk too? He asked. Darby nodded. Yeah, not as hot as mine. Unless he gets really angry. Midoriya nodded, but he looked like he wanted to ask questions. If you have questions, I may or may not answer them. Darby smirked. I don't want to sound rude, or invasive. Or bring up anything from your past you might not want to talk about, Midoriya murmured. Just this once, you can ask any question you want. Are you really gonna throw that away? Darby grinned. Midoriya smiled weakly in response. Okay. You're Tuya Todoroki, aren't you? Darby and near missed the question but immediately stopped his breathing. Of course he suspected that Midoriya might have already known, but hearing that name aloud was piercing. Kid, you're really smart, aren't you? He smiled sadly. Midoriya looked up at him, eyes wide. His head tilted to Takomi, who had ignored the conversation. I was just curious. I swear I didn't think it'd actually be correct. Midoriya cried. Takomi immediately centered his focus on the two. Darby rolled his eyes. What gave me away? He asked. The police sketch of you. It was accurate, and gave me a look at what you'd look like without scars, Midoriya mumbled. What? Takomi looked between the two. Darby sighed. I guess you should probably know my real name too, here? It'd be a bit unfair if only Midoriya knew. Takomi looked very confused and curious suddenly. Again, what? My real name is Todoroki Tuya, Takomi. Darby said, dead serious. To be honest, Kigo had suspicions that Darby had some sort of traumatic past. But now, what the hell did Endeavor do? Kigo had a long-lasting respect for the fire hero, but he wanted to know what the F he'd done to cause Darby to leave. It was obvious Darby had a very clear distaste for Endeavor, but a lot of people did, so he just assumed. He shouldn't have. Kigo knew much better, and should have known that this was no normal distaste. It's the same way when Izuku talks about Bakugo or his mother. So when Darby told him his actual name, it should have been no surprise, but here he was, mouth agape. Kigo dropped the spoon he was holding and looked at Izuku, who had the least surprised look on his face. You knew? Kigo managed to get out. In all honesty, I just figured it out. After the release of his police sketch. Izuku mumbled. Okay, this is fine. Today's been a heavy day. You two and your goddamn parental figures. Kigo groaned, relaxing a bit. Izuku shrugged and Darby lightened the mood with a laugh. Yeah, you and me got some effed up parent shrub. He ruffled Izuku's hair. Kigo had never really had his parents in his life, they didn't have a financially stable life, so the Hero Commission came knocking at their door. Give them their kid and they live happily, who would say no? Not his parents, that's for sure. Kigo would have joined in the shitty parents club, but he decided to let the two have their moment. So, I made udon? Kigo smiled. Izuku grinned and got up off the couch. It's nice to see he's doing better. Izuku had indeed perked up since Darby showed up. Kigo served the udon and the trio sat in silence. So, what's your plan to beat the other recommendation students? Darby suddenly broke the silence. Well, I don't exactly have a clear idea of what the exam is, but I've still got around 10 months until exams. My best bet is to study and train in all possible places to beat them. Izuku said thoughtfully. Kigo had to admit that wasn't one of Izuku's most well-thought-out plans, but what could he really do in a situation like this? Recommendation exams changed almost yearly, and rarely would occur twice. It's incredible what Netsu can come up with to test examinees. However, the Heroics course exam was a completely different story. The students were set up against robots. In Kigo's opinion, robots were much harder to fight than humans. They were tough, didn't feel pain, didn't get tired, and could be equipped with any number of defense mechanisms. Dabi began to give Izuku pointers on what not to do and what to do when fighting. I could have taught him that, Kigo pouted. Dabi also went into detail that fighting dirty was a great strategy, which, fair. It wasn't like Kigo got around with fighting like he was in a dojo. Izuku listened intently as Dabi explained pressure points to hit, how hard to hit them, and most importantly, how to not kill your opponent. Alright Izuku, your main goal is to save civilians, and capture the villain. You don't even have to capture the villain to get a job well done. Making sure that the civilians are safe is a top priority. The villain or vigilante, or whoever they are, can come second. Got it? Izuku nodded intently. Kigo rolled his eyes fondly. That means that you need to save me from the nasty vigilante Izuku, he exclaimed dramatically. Dabi huffed and glared at him. People like that, he gestured to Kigo, you leave in the burning building Izuku. Kigo let out a scandalized gasp. Izuku began to laugh. Thank God. The poor kid had been down most of the day, and it was nice that he was able to laugh and not think about his father. Dabi took a bite of the udon and continued, another thing you'll learn is that a lot of pros look for the spotlight. Dabi looked at Kigo. While some are very good at their jobs, see your brother, others' main focus is the paycheck they get. How it works is if they capture a vigilante, villain, whoever it may be. Even a petty thief can be claimed to be the great big supervillain to the press. That alone is enough to boost their reputation and ego tenfold. Kigo knew this all too well. It happened all the time with the commission. There was once a new hero that had brought in a middle schooler that had a villain's quirk, which was utter bullshit. The kid had been caught using their quirk against one of their bullies and narrowly escaped juvie. It was bad. Kigo listened. As Dabi talked about how fed up hero society was, I can't really blame him though. Kigo had been experiencing some of the more despicable things that the Hero Commission had let slide. Izuku had pulled up a notebook. Where did he get that? And was writing very quickly. Another thing you'll want to exploit is the fact that a lot of villains don't expect you to not use a quirk. What they expect is for you to use your quirk first. You don't have a quirk, so you don't have to worry about that. Since you're quirkless, they'll immediately underestimate you. That's good, you then can give them a swift kick to the crotch and knock them unconscious. Dabi explained and Izuku choked. I mean, it works. Kigo added. Izuku nodded and wrote that down in the notebook. So, what you're saying is, villains can more or less be Bombay speeches and I should immediately go for the crotch when fighting them. Dabi wheezed and his hand hit the table. Please tell me you actually wrote what I told you down, he laughed. Of course I did, that's just the summary. Izuku confirmed. Yeah, shrub, you've got it then. Dabi chuckled, regaining composure. The three shared a laugh. Who wants to bet I can kick both your buttes in a game of Monopoly? Kigo grinned. Come on pretty bird, we all know you're sheet with money. Dabi grinned. Izuku blinked and so did the two adults. Kigo's face went red and watched as his brother began laughing his butt off. Now, we all know I can and will beat you both. Izuku grinned and got up from the table. For the next 5 months, that's how things went. Izuku had put his training into overdrive and had half of Dagobah cleaned up. Most of the time Izuku was either working on a new assignment from Kigo's agency, or anywhere else, or he was cleaning Dagobah. Shinsu would stop by and help him out with cleaning the beach and the two would talk. Izuku also found out that Shinsu's middle school had been shut down. If you asked, Izuku can neither confirm nor deny Shinsu's parents had anything to do with it. Dabi had been hanging around more, and Izuku didn't mind. While there were rough spots with the trio, they would always bounce back. He recalled when Rumi had finally met Dabi, she'd slapped him across the face. It was hilarious. Kigo thought they were going to kill each other. Needless to say they didn't, and are actually almost friends. Kigo had been constantly pushing him to do his best, but never forcing him to. It was like having a supportive parent. It had been nice, having some people in Izuku's corner after an entire lifetime of being put down. Izuku was cleaning up Dagobah when he felt as if someone was watching him. It was very unsettling. Kigo had taught Izuku how to pick up on people following or watching you, very useful skills. Upon looking around he saw no one there, but couldn't shake the feeling. I should text Kigo or Darby. Izuku quickly pulled out his phone and shot Kigo a quick text. Hey, I think someone mgt be watching me. At Dagobah Bush. Chicken. I'll ask Darby to check up on you, he's nearby. Izuku relaxed a little, and turned around to find a man in a yellow suit standing there. Izuku's survival instinct told him to run as far as he possibly could, but his curiosity told him to check this out. He cautiously approached the man, who seemed shocked at the fact that Izuku noticed him. Yes sir, Izuku said cautiously. The man fidgeted. Young man? You were watching me. Izuku stated simply, crossing his arms across his chest. The man coughed up. Blood? Izuku stepped back. I just noticed you've been cleaning up the beach lately. Maybe I have been. Izuku responded blankly. I wanted to ask you a couple questions, the man said awkwardly. Izuku was having a mild panic right about now. Darby, bless his soul, decided now would be a good time to show up. Excuse me sir, you appear to be scaring the kid. Darby said, stepping between the two. Oh, young man, do you know him? The man asked. While yes, Darby may look incredibly intimidating with all the scars along his body, but thank God for that in situations like this. Izuku just nodded. It's good to see you Nisan. He hugged Darby with the quick cover-up. Darby, thankfully, rolled with it. Yeah shrub, we gotta get home though okay? He ruffled his hair. Izuku nodded and looked at the man. Well stranger-san, I've gotta go. Darby quickly led Izuku away from the beach and away from the strange man. Izuku let out a quick breath of relief. What the hell? Darby groaned. Izuku looked up at him. I don't know, the man just approached me. You're cursed, effing cursed. Darby cried. It's not my fault, problems just show up in my life. Izuku protested. Who was that anyway? Darby asked. No clue, never got a name. Izuku replied. That was sketchier than some of the shit I do. Darby sighed. Izuku nodded and the two approached the apartment. Kigo was already inside. Hey. I just got back from patrol. What exactly happened? Kigo asked. Darby shrugged. There was some weird but creep wanting to talk to your brother. Nothing bad happened. Oh, did you get a name? Kigo questioned, sounding slightly threatening. No, he barely got a few sentences in. Izuku replied. Demon, could have tracked him down. Kigo mumbled. Kigo no. Izuku laughed. Darby rolled his eyes and fell onto the couch. Kigo proceeded to grab the fried chicken he'd bought earlier. Kigo, why can't you seem to go a week without eating fried chicken? Darby asked. Izuku immediately perked up. Kigo? Kigo choked and Darby's eyes widened. It's recent. Kigo offered. While it's sweet and all, you came home gushing about Rumi calling you by your first name. However, Darby, call me Izuku if you're gonna call my brother by his first name. Izuku grinned. You will always be a shrub in my book. Darby groaned in return. Izuku just shrugged and laughed to himself. Izuku was going to explode. Tomorrow were the recommendation exams, and Izuku was excited. He was standing at Dagobah currently, and gazed across the cleaned beach. It was tough, but Izuku had finally cleaned the entire beach within the 10-month span that he had. Kigo approached behind him. I think you missed a piece of trash, he teased. Izuku turned around and slapped Kigo playfully. But, you owe me 5,000 yen. Izuku smirked. You get most of your paycheck from me. Kigo quipped. Izuku rolled his eyes and stared proudly at the beach. He could see that there were a few people walking along it already, but given enough time the place would be running fully again. You'll do great tomorrow, Izuku. Kigo smiled and passed him the 5,000 yen. Izuku nodded, but his head was racing. What will the other students be like? I know Shinsu didn't want to get in through recommendation, but it's still possible? Izuku recalled talking to Shinsu about the UA exams and Shinsu saying that he wanted to pass the unfair entrance exams. Izuku had also been talking with Nedzu lately. Nedzu had gone over the fact that there was an extra recommendation slot in UA this year, mostly because of him. Izuku didn't really understand why Nedzu went through those lengths to get an extra recommendation slot. It was probably because of his lack of a quirk. Izuku knew that a lot of people today were against quirkless people, so they could likely have him fail the recommendation exams, but if there was an extra slot, they had no right to refuse him the spot. Izuku wondered how everyone else was reacting to it. When Nedzu had asked if Izuku wanted to keep his quirk status private, Izuku declined. He wanted to show off his abilities for what they were, and that he did not need a quirk to accomplish it. Izuku wondered what would happen to Bakugo. He knew that there was no way Kigo would allow for them to be within 50 miles of each other, let alone in the same school. Izuku knew very well that Aunt Mitsuki would have run Bakugo through hell and back for all the things he did. It was possible that he would still be able to get into a hero school, ones that were more lenient. One that he could think of was Shiketsu. They allowed for students to be admitted into the school with previous record marks if they scored high enough. Without a doubt Bakugo would be able to score high enough. Kigo shoved an arm into Izuku's side. You're mumbling. Even if Bakugo does make it into any hero school, he won't ever amount to the hero you'll be. Izuku nodded. Thanks Kigo. Yep, now you need sleep. You can't beat anybody's but on 0 sleep. Kigo laughed. Yes, because you clearly get 8 hours of sleep every night. Izuku quipped. Shut up. Kigo groaned. You need sleep. Izuku rolled his eyes. He looked proudly at the beach one last time before heading back home. He had recommendation exams to look forward to. Izuku awoke to static running through his skin. He was up in an instant, ready to start the day. He had recommendation exams to look forward to after all. Izuku raced into the kitchen and nearly took down Kigo. Jesus Izuku, he nearly screamed. Sorry Kigo. Izuku replied unapologetically. Kigo sighed, just make sure you kick butt today. Izuku smiled. Of course, I'll make you proud. Izuku was out of the house not even 20 minutes later, heading onward to UA. Aizawa Shouter did not understand Nedzu's logic. The rat had gone and added another recommendation slot for 1A. He did not understand why he needed any more brats to be handed a spot in the hero course. That was until Nedzu had said something about a personal student of his. Shouter thought he'd died. Died and gone to hell, that is. Who agreed to being his student? He was not worried, he wasn't. It was all completely logical to have concerns about anyone agreeing to be a personal student of Nedzu's. He was preparing himself to examine the recommendation exams alongside Nedzu, currently going through the profiles of examinees. There were a lot of recommendation students this year. Of course it didn't matter how many recommendation students there were. They'd all fight tooth and nail for a spot, and of course some wouldn't make it in. It didn't make sense though. Why would Nedzu add another spot in 1A for a recommendation student? Although he had no clue who Nedzu's personal student was, he had suspicions. He looked at the first profile, Yorozu Momo, a girl with a creation quirk and incredible grades in school. The second was Setsuna Tokage, a girl with a quirk called Lizard Tail Splitter. The third, Todoroki Shouto, quirk half cold half hot. Fourth was Inasa Yarashi with a wind quirk. Fifth was Juzo Honinuki with a softening quirk. He continued to go through all of the students. Of course all of these kids were smart and very capable with their quirks, so that's why Shouto was very surprised to come across Midoriya Izuku. A kid without a quirk, and tested out of middle school. At age 12, he might add. Shouto thought that it could have been completely normal, until it was written below he was recommended by Nedzu. Ah, I found the personal student. Nedzu entered the room with a cheery smile. I do hope you're ready to watch the exam. I think you'll find yourself pleased with this year's batch. Nedzu grinned. If you mean your recommendation, we'll just wait and see. Shouto dismissed. The two stepped into an observation room, were an obstacle course. It was a bit more advanced than previous years, but Shouter didn't complain. Recommendation students needed to prove themselves too. Nedzu began to speak into the microphone. Welcome students to this year's recommendation exams. The course will begin in a few moments. Shouter watched as the kids prepared themselves. He took note of how each one prepared themselves, with confidence. One thing about recommendation students was that they were very confident, sometimes overly so. It was definitely a change to see Midoriya showing a surprising amount of area awareness, taking in all of his surroundings. Suddenly Shouter recalled when Hisashi had come home talking about a kid named Midoriya. What are the chances they are the same kid? Very likely, Shouter decided. Only because this kid looks like he'd be helping someone treat a dog bite in the living room of an apartment with the number 5 hero. Shouter suppressed a very exhausted sigh, and read it himself as Nedzu began the exams. Izuku tensed as the students around him looked ready for the exams. Even if Izuku had been excited in the morning, anxiety was a beach. He was not prepared, mentally that is. The exam begins now. Nedzu's voice rang over the loudspeaker. The examinees raced forward. Upon starting the exam, it was nothing Izuku hadn't done before. A simple race, that was all. There were obstacles, of course, but they weren't hard to get over. Izuku lifted himself over barriers and up walls. It reminded him of one of those US military courses he'd see people run online. The exam seemed to be one of testing your quirk's full ability. Izuku had 2 people in front of him, Todoroki Shouto and Inasa Yarashi. The 2 were fighting for first while using their quirks to push them forward. They'd come up to a fight wall with little to no grips to grab onto. The 2 used their quirks to propel them upwards. Izuku took the training he did with Kigo and put it to use. He vividly recalled Kigo instructing him the best ways to get up a wall. That was a long day. Quickly scaling the wall, Izuku turned his head to find that the other examinees were not too far behind. He raced forward to find the options between a crawl space and a parkour course. There was a thick layer of ice that coated the obstacle course. Thank you, Todoroki. Izuku proceeded to run along the ice. The end of the course was just up ahead and Izuku let himself sigh gratefully. This is almost over. Todoroki and Inasa already stood at the end, understandable considering their quirks. Izuku hurdled himself over the last barrier and stepped across the finish line. The other recommendation students following not far behind. Alrighty students, thank you for participating. Your next exam will begin soon. Nedzu's voice called over the speaker. Izuku relaxed, and readied himself to head to the next portion of the exam. The next exam was written. Hell yeah, Izuku silently cheered. Izuku had been doing multiple college courses over the past few years, preparing himself. The teenagers all filtered into a rather large room where paper exams were handed out to them by present MIC. Izuku began immediately. The science portion was fairly easy, in Izuku's opinion. Of course he'd been working around all sorts of sciences with the cases he worked on. A lot of the questions were more quirk-focused ones. What can you expect in a society based around quirks? Izuku quickly moved onto the math portion. Although he was not the best at math, he considered himself better than most. The algebra was easy, breezed through it. Geometry, a little harder but not terribly difficult. There were some pre-calculus and calculus questions, but in Izuku's opinion, he'd take that over geometry any day. English was the easiest portion by far. Izuku was almost fluent. Basic grammar and spelling was most of the test. There were some punctuation portions and capitalization. Izuku breezed through it and felt very confident about that. There were other parts of the tests, small subsections, writing areas. Izuku honestly felt that the test should have been harder, but he took a glance around and saw some students showing clear signs of struggle. Never mind then. Izuku went back over his test multiple times and quietly handed it to Yamada, flashing a small smile before leaving to his seat. Izuku watched as the other students slowly turned in their tests. We have interviews next. Although he'd spoken with Nedzu multiple times before, interviews could be held with any teacher. That scared Izuku a lot. He could be placed in an interview with any random teacher and had half an hour to talk to them. Finally, the last examinee turned in their test and Yamada dismissed them. Shouter had been personally selected to interview a few students alongside the other staff members. The reasons for the interviews was for faculty members to get a first-hand look at how they acted, what they were like, see if everything they've heard added up. Not surprisingly, he ended up with Midoriya Izuku, Godamnit. Nedzu said something along the lines of, "I don't want to be biased." Which Shouter called bullshit. You could be Nedzu's best friend and he would blackmail you if he so desired. The kid ended up coming in right on time, and immediately sitting down. Poor kid looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. "Alright Midoriya, interviews are just the staff members asking you a few questions, then sending you on your way." "Got it," Shouter explained. Midoriya nodded and shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Alright, it says here you dropped out of middle school at the age of 12. Shouter decided to begin with. Actually, tested out. I was able to test out of middle school, because it just wasn't teaching me anything anymore. I switched to college courses not long after." Midoriya corrected. Shouter turned to another page in Midoriya's file and sure enough, he had multiple college credits listed under his name. He suddenly got an idea. "Alright, we're not going to make this easy for you." Shouter had to hold back a grin. "So, it says here you're quirkless. What can you use to your advantage?" Well, I've been training a lot since I dropped out of middle school. I trained with Parkour for a while. They didn't let me into a normal dojo because I was quirkless, so I ended up training with my brother a lot. He taught me a lot of different ways to gain the upper hand. I don't think that it has a name, it's more of a fighting style he's developed over the years," Midoriya went on. Shouter nodded and looked at the kid. "Alright, but what are you doing to make up for it? You're quirkless. Tell me what makes you stronger than everyone else here." "I've been doing analysis over the years. I am able to track fighting styles easily, and I can counter them. You also fight quirkless, but you just level the playing field. I just do that, but differently." Midoriya replied. "Yes, but that doesn't always work." Shouter stated simply. "There are many unpredictable villains out there. What will you do when that fails? People have pressure points. Places why you can hit to put them in pain, stun them, but not kill them. I'll just fight dirty if I can't counter their attacks." Midoriya said more seriously. "The kid's not afraid to fight dirty, good. What about everyone else? They all have quirks, something to fall back on when all else fails. What will you do when you can't fall back on a quirk?" Shouter asked. "The kid has yet to break. I may not have a quirk, but I can pick up the nearest pipe and chuck it at them. I don't need a quirk to be able to fight." Midoriya said, suddenly lacking the nervous stutter. "Alright, why do you want to even be a hero? Spite? Do you gain something from it?" Shouter quirked an eyebrow. No, I just want to save people. I note that there are people who need a hero, someone to save them. There are so many people who really need a hero, I just want to save people." Midoriya stated. "Just like me," was left unspoken. Shouter knew the kid spoke from experience, but wouldn't get into that now. "Alright Midoriya, you're done here today. Exam results will be given within a week," Shouter said, watching as the kid anxiously got up. "Thank you Eraserhead, sir." Midoriya bowed and quickly left the room. The kid knew my hero identity. Shouter smirked. Nedzu had chosen well. Izuku got home and was breathing heavily. Darby was on the couch, TV on, and Kigo wasn't home yet. "Do you just live here now?" was the first thing Izuku asked. "Maybe, how'd you do?" Darby looked over to him. "I think that Eraserhead hates me." Izuku groaned, sitting on the couch. What makes you say that?" Darby turned off the TV. "Well, he berated me on being quirkless. Kept asking me what I can do to make up for it. I don't think he actually has anything against me being quirkless though. I mean, he asked what I was good at, but he looked like he didn't like me." Izuku sighed. "You know, I honestly think you impressed him." Darby chuckled. No way, he's Eraserhead. He's known for expelling people and being incredibly hard on his students. I don't think being impressed is something he's even capable of," the teen cried. "Will," Darby drew out, "you managed to impress Nedzu who pretty much hates the Human race. I think I did well on everything else though. Izuku changed the subject. Oh yeah, how well? I got third in the practical, and the written portion was pretty easy. It was just some of the things that I've been learning and practicing over the years. That's good. Who beat you in the practical? Inasa Yorashi and your youngest brother. Oh. Yeah, oh. How's he doing? Darby looked sadly at Izuku. Didn't get the chance to talk to him. He seemed pretty closed off though. Izuku looked down. I should have gotten him out of the house when I had the chance. Darby shook his head. Endeavor is an a-hole, it's not your fault that he pushed you past your limits. Izuku replied. Darby nodded. Kigo had also come through the door at some point. Hey, so I got katsudon, he smiled awkwardly. Food makes everything better. Izuku declared loudly. That got a little laugh out of Darby. Kigo sat down on the couch and placed the takeout on the table. You get results back in a week, there's no way you didn't get in. Kigo grinned. Izuku shook his head. I'm pretty sure that only the actual results will tell me. Have it your way, shrub. Darby huffed. A week later Izuku got a package dropped off at the mailbox. A box labeled UA and DMN, if he wasn't excited. Whether he got in or not, this was a letter from UA about his exam. Izuku quickly headed back to the apartment. Kigo was on patrol and Darby was hopefully doing nothing too illegal, so he set it on the counter. He'd open it when they got home. Instead, he pulled up his phone to type out a message. Hey, you get results yet? Bush. Cat, hell yeah, I got into one at WBY? HVN checked yet, waiting for Kigo. Bush. Cat, K, tell me when you open it then. Hours later, when Kigo finally got home followed by Darby, Izuku was shaking. Yugu Izuku? Kigo asked first. Izuku just smiled. I got my results back. He displayed the box. Kigo grinned and rushed over. Darby followed. So, I heard they got a new teacher to do the result holograms this year. Darby mentioned. I feel like that would have been more widely broadcasted then. Kigo said thoughtfully. Izuku hummed in response, looking up at the two adults. The recommendation exam results get a written letter instead of a hologram, he informed the two. Kigo rolled his eyes. Just open it already. Izuku nodded and opened the letter and began to read. Izuku Midoriya, we are proud to welcome you into Class 1A with a 91% on the written portion, 3rd place in the practical, and an astounding interview. Go beyond, plus ultra. Izuku simplified most of the contents. Kigo immediately hugged Izuku tightly, and Darby ruffled his hair. Told why, you impressed Eraserhead. Darby laughed. Izuku huffed and twisted out of his brother's grasp. You're on your way to becoming a great hero, Izuku. Kigo told him, reluctantly releasing him from his grasp. Izuku just smiled at him, and reread the letter over and over again. He then pulled out his phone. See you in 1A, beach. Bush. The first day of UA came too slowly. Izuku had spent days just anticipating it, only to look at the clock and realize that it was 11:34 a.m. So when he awoke at 5 a.m. because of pure excitement, he didn't complain. Instead he hurried himself out of bed and into the kitchen. Kigo was not awake yet. Izuku started the coffee machine and looked in the cabinets, then he switched to the fridge. He decided on making an American breakfast of eggs. He pulled out a pan and cracked the eggs, scrolling through the news on his phone. He looked at the time, 5:14 a.m. Welp. Izuku internally sighed, and proceeded to continue cooking the eggs. Izuku finished the eggs quickly and rushed back to his room to put on his uniform. God, I'm a mess this morning, he thought upon looking at himself in the mirror. His hair was crazier than usual and there was no way a brush would survive it. He gave up trying to fix his hair eventually and returned to the kitchen to find a very exhausted Kigo nearly asleep on the counter. Kigo, there's coffee in the coffee machine, he shouted loud enough to startle his brother out of the trance. Thanks. I do not want to patrol today. Kigo groaned. Izuku nodded sympathetically and patted his back. You'll live. Izuku said. Well, you seem to be in a cheery mood, excited about your first day? Kigo asked. Izuku nodded. Yep, it'll be the scariest day of my life. Kigo laughed. Only if you make it out to be. Wise words from someone drunk on a lack of sleep. Izuku spoke poetically. Kiego huffed and nearly chugged all of his coffee. You should get going before you're late. It's 5:50 in the morning. Izuku stared at his phone. All the more reason to get going. Kigo responded. School starts at 8:15. Kigo. Izuku glared. Yes, it takes you half an hour to get there. No one will even be there at that time. Nedzu will. I'm convinced he lives at the school. It'll look super sketchy if I show up 2 hours before school begins. Fine, have it your way. Kigo sighed. Izuku rolled his eyes and sat on the couch. I have about 2 hours. If it takes about half an hour to get there, I should leave at roughly 7:20. Ah yes, describe your entire day, why don't you? Kigo mumbled from the kitchen. Pardon me if I have a mumbling habit I need to fix. That's not the issue, you need to mumble about something more interesting. I have plenty of interesting daily agendas. No, you really don't. Fine, did you know I got some good kush from the dollar store? No, you didn't, stop quoting memes. Izuku stuck out his tongue in protest, but ultimately resigned to scrolling through the news. A bold font article caught his eye. All Might teaching at UA? Izuku set the phone down, brought his hands to his face, and screamed, Welp. F me. I sure hope not, you're too young for that. Kigo responded. No, gross, All Might is the new teacher at UA. Apparently. Izuku sighed, tossing Kigo his phone. Diamin, good luck with that. You should incorporate that into your now less boring daily schedule. Kigo looked irritatedly at the phone. No, my day is no longer less boring, it's about to be amazing. If I see him, I'm flipping him the bird. Izuku grinned. Kigo looked at him, then, send me a video. Can't miss that sheet. Izuku nodded. 6:23 a.m. Who's the homeroom teacher for 1A? He asked Kigo. Kigo frowned. Ah, I dunno. I think it's a teacher. Wow, I would have never guessed. Izuku laughed. Kigo smirked into his coffee. Yeah. Brat. Izuku thought that he'd never get to UA. He thought that his morning would have been the longest part of the day. No, life just had to go and make it so the train ride seems even longer. He eventually made it to UA, and he was not disappointed. UA was a massive school. One of the best feelings in the world was walking through the door, because it's UA. He was lost, the first day, and he was very lost. Izuku did however find 1C, where Yamada was sitting. Hey, Yamada? Where's 1A? Izuku politely asked. There was no one in the classroom yet. Yamada looked up from his papers. Oh, Midoriya. Yeah, it's down the hall. Good luck with Shouter. He gave him a kind smile. Izuku froze. Shouter? Oh. That must be Shinsu's other dad. Thank you, Yamada. Midoriya panicked and stiffly made his way down the hall. He reached the door, and wow, that's tall. Izuku entered the classroom. There were 5 students, not including him. There was Shinsu, Yorozu, Todoroki, a teen with rectangular glasses, and another with a bird head. It was about 7:50, so understandably there were only a few people. Shinsu turned to look Izuku dead in the eye. You ominous fucker. Sorry, Shinsu, today's the day you gain immortality. Izuku responded. I'm going to have to put up with your bullshit for the rest of eternity, he laughed. The glasses kid looked at them, before holding out a hand. I am Ida Tenya, from Sumi Private Academy. While I do not agree with your choice of language, I hope we become acquainted. Izuku nodded and took his hand. Izuku Midoriya, that's Shinsu Hitoshi, he gestured to Shinsu. Surely enough more students filtered in, some already forming into small groups. How? We haven't even started school. Extroverts. Izuku himself was much more ambivert. There was a brown-haired girl with rosy cheeks who came in and immediately spotted Shinsu. It's you. Thank you for saving me at the exam, she shouted, loudly. Shinsu shifted awkwardly. Yeah, you're welcome. Suddenly a yellow sleeping bag stood up, and then there was a raise ahead. Izuku had never feared more in his life. The man checked his stopwatch. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down. I'm Aizawa-sensei, I'll be your teacher for the year. Izuku immediately knew it was going to be a very long year indeed.